I call to order this special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified Number 48 Governing Board. The time is 5:15 p.m. Vice President Sanowski, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair will now have a roll call, starting from the right.
Zach Lindsay.
Libby Hart-Wells.
Patty Beckman.
Julie Sanowski.
Jan Michael Greenberg. All 5 board members are present, and we have a quorum. The board will now move to agenda item 4, approval of agenda, board action required. Are there any changes to the agenda as presented? The chair moves to approve the agenda as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Vice President Sanowski seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. The board will now move to agenda item 5, executive session, board action required. The governing board may vote to convene an executive session pursuant to ARS section 38-431-03A3 and A4 to receive legal advice from the attorneys for the public body and to provide direction to the attorneys regarding the following topic. A, discussion and consideration of renegotiation of existing easements granted by Valley Presbyterian Church at Kiva Elementary School. The chair moves to convene an executive session as presented in agenda item 5. Is there a second?
Second.
Board member Beckman seconds. Is moved and seconded to convene in executive session pursuant to agenda item 5 as presented. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. The motion carries 5-0, and the board will now convene in executive session. The August 10th, 2021 executive session of the Scottsdale Unified School District is now adjourned. The time is 6:24 p.m. The board will now move to agenda item 6, reconvening the special meeting. The special meeting is hereby reconvened at 6:24 p.m. The board will now move to agenda item 7, action. Item A, provide direction to the attorneys for the public body if necessary. I do not believe that there is any direction necessary at this time. Do any board members want to make any directions? No, thank you. The board will now move to agenda item 8, adjournment. The chair moves to adjourn the special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified Number 48 Governing Board meeting on August 10th, 2021 at 6:24 p.m. Is there a second?
Second.
Vice President Sanowski seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board adjourn this special meeting at 6:24 p.m. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0, and the meeting is adjourned at 6:24 p.m. The chair will now convene will now call to order the special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board on August 10th, 2021 at 6:25 p.m. Vice President Sanowski, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair will now have a roll call, starting from the chair's right.
Zach Lindsay.
Libby Hartwells. Patty Beckman.
Julie Sanowski.
Jan Michael Greenberg. All 5 board members are present, and there is a quorum. The board will now move to agenda item 2D, approval of the agenda. Are there any requests for changes to the agenda as presented? The chair moves to approve the agenda as presented. Is there,
Were we going to pull the personnel agenda to make that technical correction?
has that correction not been made?
There's one correction that we need to make.
Okay. The chair moves to approve the agenda as amended, the amendment being that consent agenda item 6B, personnel action items 6/9/21 to 8/10/2021 will be pulled for further discussion. Is there a second?
Second.
Vice President Sanowski seconds. It is moved and seconded that we approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. The board will now move to agenda item 3, student and staff recognitions and celebrations. Dr. Menzel.
Good evening, President Greenberg, Vice President Stanowski, and members of the governing board. It's hard to believe it's been 7 weeks since we last convened as a board, and it's really good to see you here, and I hope that your summers went well. We're 5 days into the new school year, and as you understand, our work is never done, and so tonight is the beginning of all of the hard work that we have ahead of us as we navigate this new school year. We're also pleased this evening to start by recognizing one of our fine teachers at Scottsdale Unified School District. And I'd like Dr. Sakos to come and introduce him to you this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel, and good evening, President Greenberg, Vice President Sanowski, governing board members, and the amazing Gladys. It is my honor to introduce you to Mr. Ashley Croce, Saguaro High School teacher extraordinaire, to you this evening. Come on up, run. Mr. Croce has been teaching Saguaro Sabercat since 2003. He graduated from Northern Arizona University with a BS in Social Studies, Secondary Education, and a master's degree in Educational Leadership. You can currently find him leading Saguaro's Advanced Placement, or AP classes, in Government and World History, as well as American and Arizona government classes. During these past 18 years, Mr. Croce has developed the skills of as a fine of an educator as anywhere in SUSD, Arizona, and the nation. Period, no question. His former students will tell you that Mr. Croce expanded their way of thinking about subjects that some might consider dry, injecting enthusiasm and humor into his lesson plans, as well as a thorough consideration of how to best engage students' minds. He encourages students to be curious and take part in far-reaching, thoughtful, and thought-provoking discussions as part of their learning. Even though Saguaro students have thought for many years that he is the best teacher ever, Mr. Croce has continued to be a student himself. He put his craft under a microscope and became one of SUSD's more than 80 national board certified teachers in 2016. More recently, he became a certified teacher fellow of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and is piloting a new social studies elective this fall at Saguaro called Holocaust and Genocide Studies. Such sensitive subject matter deserves no less than one of Scottsdale Unified's finest educators leading it. At Saguaro, Mr. Croce heads up the social studies department and is one of Principal Ann Oxinger's key instructional leaders. And as if that weren't enough to convince you about this teacher's many fine abilities and qualities, Mr. Croce was recently named one of the 10 candidates for the Arizona Education Foundation's prestigious 2022 Arizona Teacher of the Year Award. This is comparable to the Oscars in the teacher world. The educator ultimately selected as Arizona Teacher of the Year becomes the state's candidate for National Teacher of the Year. Mr. Croce, we congratulate you on your nomination and wish we could just end the whole competition right here, right now, maybe we can, and name you the 2022 Teacher of the Year, but we can't. Just know that you have our total, unequivocal, and enthusiastic support. Congratulations, and please accept this challenge coin. To mark this occasion, it's a secret if you go like this. All of your years to date with Scottsdale Unified School District and the many more to come. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations, Mr. Croce, and thank you. As you know, I didn't get into as many classrooms as I would have liked to last year, but I did get an opportunity to observe Mr. Croce in action, and you are definitely deserving of this nomination, and we look forward to the next steps in the process.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
The board will now move to agenda item 4, Superintendent's comments. Dr. Menzel.
Thank you, President Greenberg and members of the governing board. There are a few things that I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about this evening. And the first is, as you know, we started school last week. And earlier today, I had an opportunity to attend an event at Grand Canyon University. And I was talking with one of the administrators there, and she was talking about how it was disappointing that normally at the beginning of the year, you're rolling out new initiatives and you're being able to talk about all the things that you've got planned for the year ahead. And I said, what I am choosing to do is focus on the small wins. Last year, we didn't have an opening day. Last year, we were all online for the month of August. This year, last Wednesday, we had students return to all of our campuses for in-person learning. And I think that's a really positive development and should be celebrated. And so I want to acknowledge all of our staff, our families, everyone who's worked together so that we could have a successful start of the school year. Additionally, I would like to just point out a couple of things in terms of enrollment. I know that's always an interesting question, and we'll have more data to report at the next board meeting. But I'd like to note that from 2 years ago, our kindergarten enrollment is up by 18. Not a whole lot, but that's some. First grade up by 34. Last year was an anomaly, so we don't have the numbers to report the same way. But we have a number of schools that have shown significant increase from 2 years ago as well. One is Desert Canyon Elementary School, up by 41. Navajo is up by 130. Saguaro up by 199, and Sequoia up by 96. And so we're celebrating the growth in those schools, monitoring the attendance trends in other places, and as always, working to ensure that Scottsdale is the first choice for all of the students that live within our community, and for those who are unhappy where they are in other neighboring areas, they're welcome to join us here at Scottsdale. So that's the first thing that I wanted to point out. Secondly, as you know, we're living in an environment where many of us had hoped would be in our rearview mirror, and that is dealing with COVID. So I want to start by identifying what I think is the closest thing that we have towards a universal agreement in Scottsdale, and that is that in-person learning is best for our students. Whether people support wearing masks or don't want to wear a mask, whether they support vaccines or don't support vaccines, it has been consistently the case that parents have acknowledged and recognized that in-person instruction is critical for their students' success. Academically, from a social-emotional standpoint, from a developmental standpoint, all of these things are important. And so I think we need to build on that universal commitment. And our goal as a district is to do everything that we can during this continued response to COVID in order to ensure we're able to offer in-person learning for all of our 22,000 students in the district. So to that end, we've been working on layered mitigation strategies, and we've heard any number of parents asking for us to take action related to the prohibition on having a mask requirement and follow what 8 other districts in the state have done. We've had other people who have expressed appreciation for the district following the law. And as we continue to navigate this road, the governing board and the administration will continue to lean on our legal counsel in terms of our next steps, as well as the guidance and advice of Maricopa County Department of Public Health, which is aligned with CDC and Arizona Department of Health recommendations. Last week, we updated our dashboard indicators, not only with respect to our 15 zip codes, which we know we have extraordinarily high cases per 100,000. We've got positivity rates that are 12% or higher throughout our area. It's very high transmission at this juncture. And what we're seeing in the data is that more students are becoming sick with COVID than we saw last year. One of the things that is different, actually 2 things, last year in school, masks were required, and secondly, we didn't have vaccines. So there were different variables at play, and now we're looking at a situation where the Delta variant is more transmissible and masks aren't required, and so that changes the dynamics on the ground. I had an opportunity to talk with Dr. Sonnenschein this afternoon because there are a number of questions that we have. And just to summarize that conversation, the number 1 strategy to being able to disrupt the spread of COVID is vaccination. And this is agreed upon by all public health officials. It's agreed upon by people on the right and on the left. The governor is continuing to urge people to get vaccines. If we want to be able to slow the spread of the virus, reduce the severity of illness and hospitalizations and death, vaccination is the number 1 strategy. Dr. Sonnenschein outlined the second best strategy to slow the spread would be to be wearing masks. The third is to stay home when sick. And we've emphasized this in numerous communication to our families, but it's worth repeating again because we still have people showing up to school that are sick. We've sent home in the first 5 days 87 students who came to school while symptomatic. And so that's a concern. We also have staff that have shown up to work symptomatic. And while some may think, well, it's just a cold or it's allergies, in this environment with the transmissibility at least twice and maybe higher the transmissibility of the prior variants of COVID, we really need people to take seriously the request to stay home if you're sick. The fourth thing that Dr. Sonnenschein said as a strategy to disrupt the spread of COVID is the isolation and quarantine protocols. And she was able to provide for me confirmation today. So while I don't have a written response to my letter to the Board of Supervisors, I have a verbal confirmation that the Maricopa County Department of Public Health is requiring quarantine for close contacts of positive COVID cases. This is not a matter of recommend and it's optional. It's a requirement because in a congregate setting, the ability to go from 0 to something that's an uncontrolled outbreak is high risk. And so the county has taken that seriously. We will have probably by tomorrow the updated county letter explaining the expectation of the Maricopa County Department of Public Health to our families. So I want to just be clear that as a district, we are implementing the layered mitigation strategies that we are able to implement per law, and working to do everything that we can to reduce the risk of spread on our campuses, all with the goal of keeping our schools open for in-person instruction. The final piece is that the other layered mitigation strategies are still important. So frequent hand washing, the ventilation system that we have in place, cohorting kids as best as possible so that, you're reducing the potential for spread. The other part that is a change in the CDC guidance that we've said in our Friday communications, but worth repeating here, is that if both parties, and only applies to students, if both parties in a classroom are properly masked, then the 6 feet for close contact goes down to 3. And so you might have fewer students who are required to quarantine if, in fact, they're all masked. The other exception to quarantining is if students are vaccinated. So if someone has been vaccinated, they are not required to quarantine unless they're symptomatic. The same is also true if a student has had COVID within the last 90 days, and they have proof of either a PCR test or a doctor's diagnosis of COVID. So you have some ways to avoid quarantine. We know that it's disruptive, but at this juncture, it's the last line of defense to avoid uncontrolled outbreak. And if you've been watching the news at all, we have schools across the valley and across the state where classrooms have been closed. I've talked to NEVIC colleagues where this has happened already. Fortunately, we're not in that position, but we also want to avoid being in that position. There is one layered mitigation strategy that we have not implemented yet, but later this evening, a survey will go out to our parents, and that's the option of conducting pooled testing. And we will not do testing without parental consent, just to be clear. Our survey is designed to identify parents' willingness to participate in pooled testing. We can access this at no cost to the district. We appreciate the funding that the federal investment in response to COVID has provided. The reports from school districts that piloted this last year is that for elementary students in particular, they see it more like a science experiment. And it's once a week, a shallow nasal swab for a couple of seconds. And then if there's any COVID detected in the pool, then the second step of testing is done to determine who might be positive. And then you can quickly move to isolate and avoid a spread in an entire classroom. That would be the goal of implementing pooled testing. And we believe that it makes sense to move in that direction with the parents who are willing to sign consent, because we want to use every tool within our toolbox in order to ensure that our students and staff, when they come to school, are safe and healthy, and that we're able to avoid a major outbreak that would require us to close down a class or a building. And so that is underway, and we look forward to getting the survey responses from our parents. The other piece, just to share the data, since school started, we've had 22 confirmed positive cases of COVID on our campus. We've had 87 symptomatic students sent home. 203 students have been quarantined due to close contact. There are another 30 off-campus positive cases reported and 85 quarantines associated with those. And a total of 280 have called in with COVID-like symptoms. I want to take a minute and thank the families that have called in with their children not coming to school because they had COVID-like symptoms. Again, we need to do everything we can, and those parents who have honored that request have helped us ensure that we're not increasing the risk of COVID spread in our schools. So those are the numbers in the first 5 days. From a leadership perspective, this is really tiring. What we really wanted to be doing is talking about teaching and learning. We wanted to be talking about our preferred future as a district, building on the mission, vision, and values that we adopted. We're going to continue to do that work, but right now, at this juncture, given how much we see the increase of the transmission of the virus, this has got to be our top priority. And when we look at the quarantine requirements, that's disruptive for the teaching and learning process as well. And so there are a number of things that are underway. I understand that there's some frustration on the part of parents because they would like us just to turn on the cameras and have that all set. We are in the process of ensuring that we can provide the support students need during that quarantine period of time. That looks different if you're in an elementary level versus a middle school or high school. And our teaching and learning team has been working to flesh out what that will look like. We've provided some preliminary guidance so that students don't fall too far behind. And we also have resources that will become available with additional levels of support at those varying levels. We signaled that we have plans for small group or individual instruction, either with our teachers or with varsity tutors that can be a supplement during periods of quarantine. And if the numbers grow significantly, we may have to take even more and different action in order to address the learning needs of our students. And so this is something that we're iterating as we go. We've learned a lot from last year, and we can move and pivot pretty quickly. But I want to let you know that Dr. Guerin and her team, along with Dr. Hagegot and Dr. Sakos, are working with the building administrators to address these challenges. And so that's something that you'll continue to see updated information coming out to our families. The last two things that I want to end on this evening, one is that we have a fair number of open positions. So we're looking for people in nutrition services. It is an exciting opportunity to work with Team Awesome. Patty and that entire team are phenomenal. And we're looking for individuals who might have some time in the morning and the afternoon to support delivering food to our students across our buildings. We're also looking for staff to work in community education, in particular Kids Club. Our demand levels are very high this year, and we have wait lists in a number of buildings. And so if we have any members of our community who are interested in part-time work, they're available to support our schools. We're interested in hiring. And the last part, like last year, we're always looking to increase our substitute teacher pool. When we ask teachers to stay home if they're sick, then we need people who can step in and cover while they're not in the classroom. And so anyone who's got an interest in being a substitute teacher, we're also looking to grow that pool. Finally, I want to end on a good note. On Thursday, the 19th of August, we will be doing our Kiva groundbreaking as we take the next step in the rebuild of that elementary school. And then on Friday the 20th, we'll be doing the Hohokam ribbon cutting and celebrating the wonderful project that has been done. And I think you'd get some great testimonials from the students and the staff and the community with respect to how well they did in preserving the architectural design of that facility. And then lastly, as you know, we celebrated and did the ribbon cutting at Cherokee, and today we learned that Cherokee Elementary has been designated for two different awards, one through AIA and one through ENR for its architectural design. And so our reconstruction projects are moving forward. We have some things to celebrate, and ultimately, as a result of the taxpayer generosity, our kids are learning in phenomenal facilities. And with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Can I ask you a quick question, Dr. Menzel?
Thank you, Dr. Menzel. Board Member Beckman.
Thanks. Sorry. Just about the, given the fact that you said we have 203 students quarantined right now, can you just give our parents some indication of when we can expect to have a little bit more guidance on how these kids will be receiving their schoolwork, educated during such time?
So we're working building by building, and in many of the cases, the numbers are really small. There are a couple where there are very high numbers. And so we've been working with building administrators to communicate. We've encouraged all of our staff to make the learning information available on Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams, and then begin to work on strategies to address what might be missed when a student's not there. This is day 5 of the learning year, and so we're going to work to make sure that students don't fall too far behind. But it is really early in the process, and within the next 2 weeks, we should be able to solidify some of those components, but we'll do things more quickly. So in talking with Dr. Guerin and her team, they're already working on that communication, and I would expect that you'll have an update on Friday in terms of what to expect in the coming week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel. I'll just back up slightly. I believe he's now left, but Mr. Kroos, another congratulations, and thank you for taking up the time to teach the Holocaust and Genocide Studies course. Dr. Menzel, thank you very much for your very detailed update, especially on the guidance that we've received, and I appreciate the partnership you have developed with the Maricopa County Department of Public Health and Dr. Sonnenshine's time working with us. The governing board will now move to agenda item 5, information discussion items. Item A, presentation regarding litigation against electronic cigarette vaping manufacturers. Dr. Menzel.
Tonight, we have with us, Jennifer McClellan, would you like to introduce who we have with us? Thank you.
Governing Board President, Vice President Stanowski, members of the Governing Board, Dr. Menzel, and Ms. Wagner. The district is going to bring 2 individuals forward to present to you information regarding a potential multi-district litigation against Juul Labs, Inc., which is the manufacturer of electronic cigarettes. One is Joseph Woods, one is Mr. Grant Woods, he needs no introduction, and his partner JoJo. So I'll let them both introduce themselves and take up your time with a brief presentation.
Thank you, Jennifer. My name is Joseph Tan. Mr. President, members of the board, thank you for giving us this opportunity to discuss this important litigation. 13 years ago, I left my small hometown and moved out here to attend Arizona State University's law school. And in my very first week, I had the great opportunity and pleasure to hear retired Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor speak. And when she did a great job. And when she wrapped up, our dean asked her one question. Our dean said, if you had one piece of advice for a lawyer, what would it be? And she didn't hesitate, and she just said, do work worth doing. There's a lot of work out there for lawyers. Find good cases, bring important cases, and make a difference. And that's certainly what I think this is. And that's sort of why I team up with Grant Woods, because he pretty much only does work worth doing. We've spent the last 5 years litigating against the opioid manufacturers, distributors, and dispensers. And we're wrapping that up, and we started discussing, what are some other big problems we could turn our attention to. And Juul, the Juul company, was quickly on our radar. For anybody not familiar with the Juul company, this is a company that manufactures electronic nicotine delivery systems, is what they call them in their own literature. I mean, they're vaporizers, right? And if you've paid attention in the public schools and unfortunately in our own homes, they pop up everywhere. I have 4 nephews that have either attended or recently graduated from Scottsdale schools. So I have firsthand knowledge of kind of the problem that this has ended up being. And so, we decided to turn our attention to this, and Grant and I wanted to work on this together. We've been retained by Mesa Public School System and also Paradise Valley. I think the next couple questions are why us and why now? And why you is because you're the people that are given that power to keep our classrooms safe. And then as far as why now, I think it kind of touches on a bit of rendering legal advice, so I'll reserve that for executive session if we have one, but I think the timing is proper to bring a lawsuit to keep our classrooms safe. Now with that, as they say, to a man who needs no introduction, but I'll give one anyway. Grant was, of course, former Arizona Attorney General Grant Woods. Thanks.
Mr. President and members of the board, thanks for having us here for a very brief presentation on this. I do think this is an important case. I think it's a case that needs to be brought by school districts like Scottsdale. And once we started talking to people about these lawsuits, I just inserted my own bias, and that is an East Valley bias, and I also didn't want to represent a bunch of school districts. I thought maybe just a few. So I started with Mesa. I'm sorry, because I'm from Mesa Public Schools and graduated from there. My mom taught school there, but I have my connections here as well. My son Cole graduated from Chaparral. He went on to graduate from Chapman and the Dodge Film School, and his second film that he wrote and directed is being released later this month. So that's a tribute to the education he got at Chaparral, which was a great education. But I think the East Valley should lead the way here. They often do lead the way here in education. So Juul, some of you know I was very much involved in the tobacco litigation in the 90s. I was one of the first attorneys general to sue. I was one of the 4 attorneys general who negotiated the deal the settlement with the tobacco companies, which is still the largest settlement in the history of the United States. Arizona's received $2 billion from that tobacco settlement, and it's ongoing. It's in perpetuity. So we were hopeful that we could do something about smoking because it caused so much harm. But, we didn't know for sure whether it would work or not. And the good news is it did work. And if we look back to those, that wasn't that long ago, smoking was everywhere in the United States. It was omnipresent. It was part of our culture. It no longer is. Youth smoking was at 29%. Today, it's about 4%. So we achieved great success there, and we're very pleased with that. But in the last few years, something else happened, and that is Juul came along. And Juul, I believe, I will tell you, my view is just as devious as the tobacco companies, and now they are a tobacco company because a third of Juul has been bought by one of the major tobacco companies. That should tell you something. They may or may not have started with worthy intentions of being a smoking cessation device. They say they did. I don't know if that's true or not. But they quickly went the tobacco route when they saw that they had a tremendous market out there. And the market is primarily caused and driven by what they are, which is a nicotine delivery device. You get more nicotine from one Juul pod than you do smoking an entire carton of cigarettes. And nicotine on young, developing brains in particular, we know from science, is a very destructive thing. So they should have gone 100 miles away from young people and the youth market and been leaders. And had they done that and properly educated the adult population and not lied about their product, then we wouldn't be here today. We would have said, okay, adults can make up their own mind. But they marketed, in our view, and in our allegations and our lawsuits, they marketed directly to children. They had a marketing plan that was designed to get middle school and high school students and young people to use their product. And that's particularly evil, in my view, because nicotine is very addictive to most people. And so that's how they do so well, because they get young people addicted on a very dangerous product. And we don't know all the other problems that are going to come about because of this vaping, because it's new. It's not good. But just in a nutshell, they were on Nickelodeon. They advertise directly to kids. They have flavors. Many of us in the AG world try to talk them out of these flavors. Why do you need bubble gum? Why do you need Tutti Frutti? Why do you need these sort of things if you're not interested in marketing toward children? And they were unwilling to get rid of these flavors. So I don't think we need to tell you that it became an epidemic in this country just in the last 4 or 5 years. And by epidemic, I mean it's everywhere. It has been everywhere. And the word is slowly now, I think, getting out, but young people certainly don't know what they're doing. They don't know the dangers there. And so you have a big tobacco company that is now part of this Juul company, and they have honed their forces on our kids. So a lot of people said no, finally, and said, okay, we're going to take them on, and we're going to sue them just like we sued the tobacco companies. So that's what's happened. We have the law firm that we partnered here. They're out of state of Washington, but their second biggest office is in Arizona, and their managing partner was in law school with me. That's how old he is, but he was top of the class, so I don't know him that well. But he's here, so we have a local presence there, and most importantly, I think we're here, and we're Arizona guys, and we'd like for you to be a part of it. So what does that mean? I can answer any questions you have as far as the mechanics of it. And most people want to know, what will it cost the school district? It really doesn't cost you anything. It's a contingency case. They all are. The firm we're hooked up with is representing the city of Seattle. There are many other school districts, King County. You have all around the country people are suing. The school districts are a little different than a county and then a city, you have your own damages, what would those be? I can tell you we sued for Mesa in the last several months, Mesa being the largest school district. And then we looked at a number of things there. A lot of time and energy is taken away from educating kids dealing with Juul and vaping. And so that might be teachers, it might be administrators, it might be janitors. It's certainly a problem in bathrooms in many campuses. Mesa has identified that they had a problem of parents going to charter schools because they thought vaping was out of control at the public school. There's all sorts, so it's reputational damage as well. Whatever it is that they have caused to take away from what your schools should be doing, that's what we're going to try to get back from them. So we would work through that. The costs are borne by us, by the lawyers. That's just the way it goes. And we get those back if we prevail. If we don't, then we eat those. Okay, so that's that deal. We have most favored nation there. If we do, we have that with Mesa, for example, so we offer everybody the same contingency fee. If we somehow, we're not going to, but if we did offer somebody some way a better rate, then it would automatically come back to you. We're not planning on doing that. What it costs you then ultimately is a little bit of time. And it's not a lot. And I would tell you if it was. When we sued tobacco, it was a lot of time that state employees had to spend on this because it was just massive. But this one is mainly, we'd have some designee, and we'd work with your council, and we would just there's a workup sheet, we would work that up, and that's about it. Lastly, how does a case work? We file it here in federal court, and it is, they're very quick on this. Within minutes, it seemed they had, when we filed for Mesa, they'll do the same thing when we file for Paradise Valley, and if we file for you, they're in there and they push this to a national, it's called an MDL, multi-district litigation. This case is in, all the Juul cases are up in San Francisco, and so that's just so, it's only fair, makes sense. You don't want to have, in fairness to the defendant, they don't want to have 1,000 people doing separate depositions and discovery and all of that. So it all comes within under one judge. And there are some bellwether cases out there. One of the bellwether cases is out of Tucson. That means that might get tried first, and then we see what a jury thinks of that. You will not be a bellwether case, I can tell you that, because we're down the road. And when Joe says it's a good time, I believe, because these lawsuits, other lawsuits around the country have been filed, and we're down the road quite a bit. And that means motions to dismiss, motions for summary judgment, these sort of things, we're over that. So you don't do all the work and just get kicked out. But you're not so far down the line where you risk someone will, if there was a settlement, let's say, they would come in and go, well, these guys came in at the last minute. We're kind of in the sweet spot right now, in our view, just to give you an idea. That did just happen in opioids. There was a big controversy about, what about people who just, hey, there's a settlement, boom, we're in, where's our money? They try to take care of that problem. It's only fair to do that. So we think now's the time. We think, we're the right people. We're Arizona lawyers, and we do have this. We fought the big boys before, and we beat them. And these are big boys. They got unlimited money, basically, on the Altria side. And but we're going to beat them again. There's no guarantees, but I'll give you as close to one as I can. We're going to beat them again because what they did was wrong. They need to pay for it. And we'd like to have you be there for this cause because it's a righteous cause.
Thank you. Are there any board member questions at this time? Vice President Sanowski?
Yes. Counselors, thank you for bringing this on. I wish this was the case 5-10 years ago when this was starting to impact students and they were using these products. My main question is, what is in it for our kids in Scottsdale schools?
Yeah, well, it remains to be seen what a settlement would look like, for example, if we have to ultimately try the case, which I don't anticipate, but if we did, then you would decide, if there was an award, you would decide what the money is spent for. If it's settled, then there's different ways to do it, okay? And we would want to hear from you as our client, how would you like to see it done? And we would, argue for that. But I can tell you my bias already, and that is the money, we believe, should be spent for vaping-related, Juul-related problems. So consequently, a lot of that's education. It may be resources until we get Juul kicked out of the schools and so that we don't see vaping anymore. Whatever it is, we would come up with a plan and work with your professionals here. You would come up with the plan, and the money would go toward the problem. And the reason I say that because sometimes these things are resolved and the money goes to the general fund and it disappears. And I'd like to tie that, we'll see what happens, but I'd like to tie people's hands. I can tell you in opioids, which is an awful lot of money, it's a $26 billion settlement that was just announced against some of the manufacturers and distributors. And every state's doing it differently, but we were very involved in Arizona with the Arizona Attorney General, and 100% of the money has to go towards opioid abatement, none to filling potholes and all that. So I'm proud of that, and that's what we'd like to see here. So we'd like to be able to come to you and say, you guys spend whatever money however you want to, but it has to be towards this problem.
Thank you. One more question, if I may. You had mentioned that you would work with the designee with our council, and that it wouldn't be a lot of time or not much time. What do you suspect would be the estimated cost or time expected from our personnel?
So far, and we've already brought suit in Mesa and filled out what Grant referred to as the plaintiff fact sheet. And total, we talked to about 10 people from the entire district, and we took a couple of hours of their time. Now, with outside counsel, it was more like 5 or 10 hours. But it's really minimal. That's sort of, our approach to it is you're hiring us to do all the work. So the hours and hours and hours, we take that burden on, and we try to minimize it as much as possible. In fact, I was general counsel to a healthcare company here in Scottsdale. So we're very familiar with using people that specialize in a particular area to do that so we can do our job.
Thank you.
Board Member Beckman and then Board Member Hartwells.
So I thank you as well. I think the rest of the board and leadership knows that this is a topic that's, I'm quite passionate about, having 2 high school students myself. It has become an epidemic. You speak to any of our kids, they know what's going on in our schools. With regard to the help and the assistance, I presume you'd need a lot of our data, and we do a great job at looking at, for instance, the disciplinary referrals, et cetera, and the difference between what it used to look like and why, and where vaping is now. And I can tell you, I think it's probably number 1. Personally, I would love to see, and I know we probably will talk more about this in exec session should we go back there, not only education, but programs for our children that are already addicted to this. I mean, this may shock our public if they weren't tuned into the meeting last time we talked about this subject. We had one week where our leadership took 5 vapes off one of our elementary school campuses in 1 week. One school, 5 vapes, 1 week. Elementary kids, 8, 9, 10 years old. So it is a huge thing. So some of our kids are already addicted. So I would love to see not just the education, but have those kids that don't come forward, that are scared every time they come to school because they have an addiction and they're trying to hide it. How do we help them? So yes, how does this money, should we receive any or an award, help our students?
That's perfect. And that's exactly, we share that view. Yeah, it is very addictive. And so, yeah, these kids, it's also, it just, when you think about it, so, they created this product under the guise that we're going to help people become unaddicted to cigarettes. And instead what they did was just got them addicted to nicotine, which is not right.
Board Member Hartwells.
Thank you. I wonder if you might delineate how your case with, I guess, representing Mesa, since you're using that as somewhat of a proxy for us, is different from the Attorney General's lawsuit against Juul?
So we have more specific damages that are specific to the school district. And to kind of piggyback and dovetail with Grant's point earlier, and Ms. Beckman's point is, the real purpose here is to both, for education, prevention, and treatment. And we filed what is called a public nuisance case. And particularly, we want to abate the public nuisance. And we think a strong part of that is education. And particularly, we see the Jewel universe kind of breaks down into two camps. And one is to keep new people from becoming addicted. And then the second is to make sure that people that are addicted are getting whatever treatment, whatever programs, and what education they need. And we think that the defendants who caused this public nuisance should be the ones that are financing that and that are taking that burden on, not the taxpayers. And so, we think that the proper venue to educate our children about this important issue is the public school system. Because I know of no better entity that does a better job of educating children than our public school system.
In contrast to the AG's case, which is fraud?
The Attorney General's case, and I'm happy that they sued. I mean, so I think that was a good thing from my view. But so theirs will be just more general damages. They're not going to be specific for a school district, for example. So I think, for example, in opioids, they actually did not sue, really, and yet they're a player. They're going to be a player no matter what. And so what we looked at them for was, what about education on a statewide basis? We don't want Scottsdale to have to educate Nogales, So things like that will be what they would be looking at ultimately, is on a broader basis. If you look at a county, and then I don't believe any have sued here that I know of, but if a county sued, they might be looking at their health departments and how they might have been burdened or something like that. We just chose here not to approach any other government entities other than school districts, and to, again, just do a few. That's where we're coming from. Although our team does represent around the country others, but they're going to be settled separately and differently. States will settle differently, counties will settle differently, and certainly school districts will, because the damages are different.
So on that, you mentioned, I just want to make sure I understand, the multi-district litigation. So if this were to move forward, let's just use Mesa since that's a live example.
Yes.
They'll be tried out of San Francisco, that's the jurisdiction?
Will they what?
What was the San Francisco component?
Oh,
Can you put that in context?
All the cases, they've decided, these Jewel cases have been accepted as what's called an MDL, or multi-district litigation. And that means all the judges, basically, wherever we file in Arizona, they will transfer it to that particular judge. And then he handles it. And that's the same way, that's how it's usually done.
Okay.
It wasn't how tobacco was done, but it is how opioids are done. That was out of Ohio. So they pick a judge who knows what he's doing or she's doing, and that's the deal. So we'll have to deal with that. The other thing I should have mentioned, two things. One is the Attorney General is able to sue also under consumer protection and the consumer protection statutes. And we go to public nuisance here, which we can still do here in Arizona. And we do view this as a public nuisance, certainly for the schools. The other thing is one of our partners here in this is on the leadership team. So the way it works is the court will appoint 1, 2, 3 people to head up the leadership team from the plaintiff's side. And so one of our partners here, which will be your lawyer as well, is one of the key people in this. So that's good for us because he's going to be in the room. I hope to be in the room too, but we know he's going to be in the room. I might have to push my way in there a little bit. But.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. You mentioned the burden and damages. Would you need access to student data?
Eventually, if we get that far, and we'll have to see what's required. Right now, we do this plaintiff's fact sheet, so there is some of that information in there, but it's not a big download for you all yet. So it's not like a normal lawsuit where if we file the lawsuit, then boom, we're going to have to let the other side have everything that we're ever going to have. That's not the case here. They want you to file, they want the basics, and then we'll see where it goes. That's the way they're looking at it. They don't want to spend, if there's tons of these lawsuits out there, all around the 50 states, they don't want to spend all that time and effort unless we have to. And ultimately, if we have to, we will. But then that would be somewhere down the road here.
And just one other point on that, when we do use the data, we use redacted metadata. So we're not looking at the students' individual names because that's irrelevant for our purposes. We want to know numbers, we want to know incidents, but the name of the student is, quite frankly, none of their business, and really, we don't need it to do our job.
So animatized aggregate data is what
Correct.
you'd be looking for, high
Yes.
level? Okay. I don't know if it's appropriate to ask a few of my other questions. I don't know if those need an
Are
executive
you
session.
seeking legal advice?
No, I'm asking the business terms of your,
You can do that.
with your business terms with Mesa. And what, you mentioned a most favored nation arrangement, which means we would be getting what they got. So is it okay for me to ask these questions?
I
It's fine
believe
with
so.
us.
And
That's fine with us.
if any concerns raised, I'm sure Lori Bird or Jennifer McLennan or counsel can step in.
It's 25% contingency.
On the settlement or recoveries
Yes.
after you recover your costs? out of
Costs
pocket?
come off the top, and 25% is the maximum. And I will tell you our goals here, but that is what the contract will say. And so, for example, Joe and I represented Pima County and Tucson in our efforts here with the state and against the defendants there, and our contract there was 25%. In that case, we, along with many others on the national basis, we pushed to see if we couldn't get the defendants to pay a portion of the attorney's fees, since they caused the problem. And that also, so it gets a little complicated, frankly. And in that case, it was the most complicated thing I would tell you I've ever seen. And it was a big mess. But we finally got part of that done. And then the judge came in and said, well, you're not going to be able to, if you're going to assert your contract, you could not do it for more than 15%, no matter what it says, which is fine for us because we'd already driven it below that by getting the defendants to throw in, and what we did in Arizona. I want to get too much in the weeds, but there's also a free rider problem, and we may deal with that at some point in time. And that is, there's school districts who, what happens with them? In opioids, every city and town and county gets money whether they sued or not. So we had to deal with the free rider problem. Why should Phoenix or Maricopa or well, I don't think Scottsdale sued, do they? Scottsdale's a free rider, sorry. Why should Scottsdale get a lump sum of money and right next to them, Phoenix, paid for the lawyers and did all this sort of stuff, and that's going to come out of there. So that's not right. So we came up with a formula so everybody throws in, the number goes way down. But to answer your question, it says it's 25%. That would be the most it would be.
Okay.
And if we don't prevail, and obviously, Jewel denies all this, and so far they fought us all the way, but everybody does until they don't, I will say.
We're also settling.
But if we don't, then we're just out.
Right.
It's our risk.
Okay. In the billable hours, presumably there's a list of attorneys, authorized attorneys that are on the case, and you have a fee schedule of billable hours.
But we don't bill by the hour, so,
Okay.
we will, some are better than others at keeping track of these things. I'm at the bottom of that list. But, basically, it's just a straight number thing. Although we do keep track of our hours, but we don't bill you anything. That's it.
Okay. All right. and then
You don't
direct
get billed
costs.
by the hour.
Okay.
No matter what, even if we lose, like I said, we're just out. Opioids, we've worked, I don't know, 3 years, and sometimes on a good portion of that on a daily basis, we've never been paid yet. I'm very hopeful we will, but but the other part of that is, this is not just nonsense. I have been here my whole life, so it's a cause. We're cause guys. We could go do other things where you do get paid, but this is worth doing. Like I said, I'm not in this for anything else except we're going to take these guys on, just like we took on all these other people who hurt young people.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions at this time.
Are there any other board member questions at this time? And as a reminder, we will have an executive session, so we can ask additional legal questions during that session of this. No? Well, thank you very much for your presentation and for answering our questions at this time. And I believe you're being asked to stay in case we have for the executive session.
We can.
Is that correct, Jennifer?
Up to Jennifer.
Mrs. President, members of the board, it's really up to you all. So if you'd like them to stay, or if you'd like just to talk with your outside counsel, you can do either. So
Would you, Board Member Beckman?
Would we be taking action?
you do not have it on your agenda tonight.
Okay,
you
so I
would
don't,
need-
I mean, we do need to decide if we want to keep them here, if there's no action to even be taken afterward. If we were taking action, I would probably lean towards yes, but if we're not, then.
In other words, we can ask any additional questions between now and the next board meeting if we put it on an action item. I think that that's a fair and reasonable position to take, in which case we can dismiss them for the evening. Let them have the rest of their night. Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. The board will now move to agenda item 5B, information discussion item, SAA, SEA, and SSPA updates. Dr. Menzel.
Thank you, President Greenberg and members of the governing board. As was discussed towards the end of last year, or actually might have been even the beginning of the calendar year, there was a desire to create an opportunity from time to time to hear directly from our association representatives. And so tonight we have representatives from all three. I don't know if you've drawn straws to see who goes first. Oh, are they going to come together? Beautiful. Thank you.
Good evening, President Greenberg, Vice President Sanowski, members of the board, Dr. Menzel, Ms. Wagner, and guests. My name is Grace Dombries, Principal of Cheyenne Traditional School and Co-President of Scottsdale Administrators Association. SAA organized in 1974 and is a professional organization of principals and assistant principals in the Scottsdale Unified School District. Our purpose is to promote the common good and general welfare of site-level administrators by providing support, working collaboratively with the superintendent's leadership team, providing opportunities to socialize and recognize retiring members, and to represent school administrators and meet and confer. SUSD had a history of collaboration and mutual respect between school and district leaders, evidenced by trust in and compliance to the administrator's employment agreement for fair, transparent, clearly defined processes, hiring and leadership opportunities from within, salaries, evaluation, working conditions, and participation in district-level decisions that impact our students and school employees. The administrator's employment agreement brought assurance that SUSD recruits and retains the most qualified school administrators. That was until the administrator's employment agreement was allowed to expire in 2017 and meet and confer ended. SAA thanks this governing board, President Greenberg, Vice President Sanowski, board members Beckman, Hartwells, and Lindsay for approving governing board policy HA and thereby mandating the recognition of our SUSD employment groups and returning SUSD to the collaborative process of meet and confer. SAA has developed our meet and confer team representing principals and assistant principals. Although we have not begun the process of meet and confer, SAA has been meeting regularly with Dr. Menzel and with SSPA and SEA to share interests and concerns and our hope to maximize positive impact in this first year of our return to meet and confer. As an immediate first step, and in good faith, SAA requests the reinstatement of the 2016-17 Administrator's Employment Agreement. We believe the agreement is a solid framework for beginning the process of meet and confer, with the understanding that updates are needed and that the voices of new employees and more recent experiences will join the dialogue. SAA looks forward to collaboration with SSPA, SEA, and SUSD because we are better together. Does the governing board have any questions or comments for SAA?
Do any governing board members have any questions or comments for SAA? Board Member Hart-Wells?
Thank you, Ms. Stombros. I just want to clarify your request, reinstating the 2016-17 administrative employment agreement as it was.
As it was, with the understanding that there were going to be updates that are needed. We'd like to just start with that framework because we do believe it was a solid framework that was built from that collaboration that existed before.
So not use it as a starting point for meet and confer discussions, but rather reinstate and then amend
Yes.
in the meet and confer? I just want to, thank you for clarifying. I just want to understand that sequence. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Vice President Sinowski.
Of course. I'm thrilled that you use this language, and I believe you mean it too, as an organization to include and improve for the best interest of delivering instruction to our students. So thank you for being so collaborative. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? As you know, we're working on our strategic plan at the moment, and this question really goes to all three associations. And part of that plan is obviously how we can learn from the past, learn from the present, and be better in the future. And one of the guiding principles or templates that we've been using for literature purposes is Mark Tucker's, leading high-performing school districts. And part of the discussion there is about how staff are compensated for the impact they have on schools, the leadership roles they take on, the opportunities that are afforded to them, in the different teaching environments. Is this literature that you have had the time to review? Is this something that you and your organization have discussed internally in line with how future meet and confer processes may look in terms of changes to the former agreement and kind of the philosophy behind that literature and what the strategic plan is looking at?
And President Greenberg, I appreciate the question. The truth is that it has come up in discussion. Honestly, as an organization, we believe we have a ways to go to correct some of the issues within the salary schedules, within the pay structures, and we would like to see correction before we move forward to any additional compensation, although it is something that we would be discussing. We did not dive deep into that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions or comments at this time? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Menzel, President Greenberg, Vice President. You're making me cry. Stop looking at me. Sorry. Vice President Snowski, members of the governing board, Ms. Wagner, and guests. I'm Becky Williams, and I'm honored to be representing our certified staff as the elected president of the Scottsdale Education Association. We appreciate the opportunity to update you on our work to serve the students of SUSD. This past May, as happens each year, our executive board elections were held. We had 9 of 11 board positions open, and I would like to take a moment to recognize those that were elected to serve on this board. If you're here, please stand, and if you're home watching the feed, I'm waving at you right now. So, I am currently serving the second year of my term, as is our secretary, Carrie Curland. Whitney Keeler was just elected to a 2-year term as vice president. Anna Patterson was reelected for a 2-year term as our treasurer. Of our members at large, 4 were reelected to serve for a year: Bert Tveld, Beth Hindenburg, Dave Hanlon, and Patricia Vasso, as well as 3 new members: Charity Rekla, Jenna Emig, and Karen Batson. Our board serves to govern our association as well as liaise with site leaders so that we are in constant communication with our members across the district. Thank you. At the end of July, SCA was proud to host a lunch for new educators as part of the SUSD New Teacher Orientation. The ability to provide this event for our new educators allows us to share how association membership can enhance one's professional career here in SUSD. This July, we had over 30 member leaders on hand to greet the over 100 new certified staff, including classroom teachers, guidance counselors, social workers, SLP, and other related service specialists, among many new certified staff. We were able to get information from them about their goals, interests, and needs as new educators to SUSD. Our team of new educator organizers will use this data to connect with and support them as they begin their journey in SUSD, helping to ensure that we lead the way in retaining the qualified staff that has chosen to make Scottsdale their professional home. Our students deserve it. The beginning of this school year is one that is difficult to express in words. After the seemingly overwhelming challenges that all of us who work in education, as well as our students, faced last year, it was exhilarating to begin this one with a sense of normalcy and to greet our students on day one in our classrooms. Our members are thrilled to be doing what we do best, teaching kids in classrooms. However, the uncertainty of the global pandemic remains. Staff may become ill and have to stay home for prescribed isolation periods in order to keep our students healthy and in buildings. We have shared this issue with district leadership to ensure that our educators do not have to use their earned days if they have to take days due to COVID. We applaud the district for taking the initiative to continue to offer COVID-related leave through the FFCRA extension vote slated for this evening's agenda. Since policy was passed earlier this year to reinstate the meet and confer process between the district and the associations, we have been working to engage our members in the process. We are bringing forth voices, gathering priorities, building teams, and creating engagement. We are listening to our members, and certified staff have needed time and space to regroup from last year and focus on a great beginning to this year. We are now gaining momentum toward the bargaining process and plan to be ready to sit at the table by the end of the first quarter. We all look forward to the collaboration that will bring forth a new employment agreement for our district's certified employees. Lastly, this evening, I would like to reiterate my appreciation for this dedicated agenda time for a board update. The established regular practice of a board report would show the value that the district places on collaboration with its employees, ensuring that we're all part of the decision-making process, and the belief that we all do our best work better together. We certainly hope to see this practice continue. I thank you all for your time tonight and look forward to the great things ahead for the students of SUSD through the collaborative work of our associations with the district.
Thank you. Are there any board member questions or comments? Vice President Zanowski?
I just looked at you.
I'm sorry, then you don't need to speak.
Of course I have a comment on this. I just have to say, all three organizations and our employees in general have really demonstrated perseverance and caring, and such a fine balance of that. So I thank you all. And I clearly understand that when you work hard to improve your working conditions and the work environment, you are absolutely working hard to improve the learning environment and the quality of product education that our students receive. So again, I can't thank you all enough for hanging in there.
Are there any other board member questions or comments? I will pose the same question to you. And
I was about to say thank you for not. I have read portions of Mark Tucker as it relates to strategic planning, and we have not, as a leadership team of SEA, looked at it as a tool for bargaining yet. I guess we're adding it to a to-do list.
Well, thank you. I just want to make sure, the importance here is, alignment, obviously, that we want to,
Yes.
What was used in the past was fantastic, but as was acknowledged, that we are trying to move forward, and I want to make sure that there is that alignment with our strategic plan. Otherwise, and obviously, the hope is the philosophy that's guiding that is very supportive of all of our staff and supports them both with the responsibilities they're given, the respect they're given to carry out their jobs respectfully, to carry out their jobs, official duties, as well as the monetary compensation for that work to the greatest extent possible. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Governing Board President Greenberg, Vice President Sanowski, Governing Board members, Superintendent Dr. Menzel, and Gladys. You guys know I'm really bad at this. I get really nervous, so bear with me. My name is Carrie Blaker, and I am the SSPA President, second year. I would like to start by celebrating our teachers, students, and our parents as we open the 2021-22 school year. It has been so nice welcoming everybody back to our campuses. The rally was very much appreciated and welcomed. Your education support professionals came back strong and wanting to support student learning. In addition, we are also celebrating being recognized in 2 publications from the National Education Association for the outcomes of our job family meetings and the relationship building across the district. The Scottsdale Support Professionals Association is supporting teaching and learning through these relationships. ESPs represent many job families. As we always talk about the 9 job families, we always talk about the 9 job families, but please allow me to introduce them as they are really known. We make up under 1,300 employees, serving the district as athletic equipment coordinators, child care providers, clerical staff, and communications. We are committed as community specialists, building services, grounds, and health assistants. We stay devoted to the task as library resource assistants, materials handlers, nutritional services, and para-educators. As school aides, security officers, and transition specialists, we help students stay safe so that they can stay focused to learning. We cannot leave out our skilled trade workers, our amazing technology team, and transportation, who without all of our combined efforts and commitment, SUSD could not be where it is today. These jobs are all different, but they are all necessary pieces of the puzzle to ensure that we have a thriving school district. Because of the different roles, SSPA has a duty and goal to engage with all ESP job families through one-on-one conversations and job family meetings to identify creative ideas, areas of improvements, and solutions to keep us growing and finding ways to support our district. So far, we have organized 31 job family meetings. We have had 351 one-on-one conversations with our fellow co-workers, and out of these, we have identified over 200 people that have expressed their interest in connecting with others in their fields. We are currently reaching out to our native Spanish speakers to give them a space for their voice to be heard as well. The common themes that have emerged is to rewrite the job descriptions to better align with actual duties, in addition to aligning that to equitable pay. We know that the people performing these jobs are the best ones to identify these topics and bring forward proposals and solutions. We have already had success with some job families, and we will continue to do the work to reach all to ensure a space for their voice. Our next steps are to bring these ideas as proposals to the meet and confer process that we would like to kick off starting in October. This gives the classified staff time to get settled back into its new normal, to have more meaningful conversations and proposals. A goal we would like to achieve is to attend new hire events for classified employees where they can make connections with fellow coworkers and be welcomed to the district. This connection is important to making people feel comfortable and connected. Dialogue will continue with the SUSD to see how we can create this system, given that ESP hiring is different by job family. We look forward to continuing the work with our ESPs and the district. As families choose to invest in SUSD, we would like to thank the Governing Board and Superintendent for investing in us, education support professionals. As we all know, we are better together, and we also thank you for adding us to the agenda to share our stories. If you have any questions or want, I'm setting myself up for failure for this one. If you have any questions or want additional information, I invite each of you to reach out to me personally. Thank you.
Are there any board member questions or comments? Vice President Sanowski.
Yes. Comment, yes. The education support professionals, all 1,300 plus of you, I think are some of the most underappreciated employees in our district, not just from a compensation standpoint, but from the true point of understanding how important you guys all are to providing education to our kids in our classrooms. So to all 1,300 of you all, thank you. And I
you.
look forward to all three groups working together to continue to improve that process.
Thank you. You could plan on it.
Are there any other questions or comments? Same question.
Well,
But I will, and every time I ask, I'm going to add a little something
great.
for everybody. I apologize. In addition to that, a lot of the really interesting opportunities that were discussed, I know some of them existed in this district in the past, but, mentorship opportunities, subject matter expert, professional development, how we can help education, further education for those who wish to pursue those courses, and also how we can grow our own and really not only retain them, which was mentioned, but make them the leaders that they can be, for those who want to take up that opportunity. So same question to you. Have you had the opportunity to review this with your staff or not yet? And is it something you plan on doing?
I actually, I serve on the Strategic Planning Committee, and I was very excited to receive my book. It was very engaging, and I thought as a classified staff member that it would not talk to me. So it was very exciting for me to share with our group that they had to read this book because it did pertain to them as well and spoke at our language. So since then, yes, I've had a couple people pick up the book.
That's great. I appreciate that. And just thank you all to all of your organizations and all of your staff for all the work you do. We could not do our job without you. That's the simple truth there. So thank you very much. Any final questions or comments for any of the associations? Well, thank you very much for taking the time to be here. And again, the board will now move to the consent agenda as amended. Are there any questions or comments on the consent agenda as amended? The chair moves to approve the consent agenda as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Board Member Beckman seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board approve the consent agenda as amended. Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. The board will now move to consent agenda items 6B, personnel action items 6-9-21 to 8-10-21. Dr. Menzel.
Thank you, President Greenberg. I would like to draw your attention to page 8 of the personnel items under the certified department, third line from the bottom in that category. Every other category is $110 per day. There is one that's listed as $110 per hour, which would be really nice, but it's not what was meant to be there, so it's a technical correction. We wanted to make sure you approved that $110 per day. That is the only change to the personnel action item.
That would be a nice rate. Are there any questions or comments about the recommended amendment? With that, the chair moves to approve consent agenda items 6B, personnel action items 6-9-21 to 8-10-21, changing Yvonne White's $110 per hour rate to $110 per day rate. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion is seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries 5-0. The board will now move to agenda item 7, action items. A, authorize the expenditure for advertising and marketing services for fiscal year 2021-2022.
Thank you, President Greenberg. I would like to invite our guests from Davidson Beluso. I believe we have Bruce Nilsson, the Chief Strategy Officer, Gary Campbell, Director of Public Relations, and Christine Korecki, Director of Account Management, to do the presentation this evening.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Can you hear me? Everybody just turn your eyes to the screen. That's where all the work is going to be. We're going to walk you through the strategy, the creative execution, public relations, and then timeline and associated costs with the recommendation for marketing to celebrate the 125 years of SUSD's existence. How do I do that? All right, driving this is what we call the halo of history. It's a unique moment in time, 125 years of success and changing the landscape of public education here in Scottsdale. I'm going to show you how we're going to bring that to life. Fundamentally, we want to use it to leverage the past, present, and future of the district. It's not just a look back, but rather how what we did in the past has got us to where we are today and how it's going to position us for the future. Fundamentally, to energize and sustain enrollment. It's all about student enrollment. Saw some impressive numbers mentioned earlier, so you're well on your way there. We're going to continue that. And then finally, create a uniform and discipline to build on the marketing efforts beyond this 1 year. This isn't a one and done. It'll set the stage for future marketing efforts in the years ahead. Okay, the ABCs of our recommendation are as follows. Unity. We want everything that goes out from a marketing standpoint to be enveloped with this brand called Unified and Excellent. So you're going to see what we call a badge that we're going to put on all the marketing communications. We're going to have constant presence, the idea there being you're going to be somewhere every day or you're going to be everywhere some days. So for the next year, you will not be able to live, breathe, and work in Scottsdale and not see something about the district promoting its history, its heritage, its legacy, and what it's doing to promote public education. We're going to turn the schools into its own media. As you drive onto campuses on all your 29 schools, we see opportunities for banners, lobby posters, you name it, ways to populate that, and you'll see it here in the creative execution shortly. And then finally, I'm going to turn over to Gary, and he'll walk you through the participatory or experiential aspect of it, so that we want the citizenry to be involved in this celebration. It's not just something you read about, you can actually participate in, both as a parent, a student, school against school, district as a whole. All right, so what do I mean by unity? We're going to create a badge for you. You're going to see that. And we're going to base the narrative on everything that we communicate on the vision, mission, and values. In fact, you'll see the position line reflect 2 of those values in its statement. Constant present, like I said, somewhere every day somewhere. Digital, social, and PR will be fundamental to the media recommendations. That's where everybody lives and breathes now. Digital is everything. School is media. You talked about this. Environmental graphics. You can have events at each school property. And you can even create traveling exhibits to schools. And then finally, participatory, God, I wrote that and I can't say it, and experiential quizzes and contests around the history, theme content, class projects could be taught at the school about the history and what was going on in Scottsdale 100 years ago, make that part of a history class, whatever. And then community events, open houses, things like that. So, without getting too far in the weeds, this would be an example of what a badge could look like. Celebrate the 125 years. This would be something that could go up on everything, websites, and you'll see how we apply it. Banners, it's modern, it's uplifting and dynamic. It doesn't look old, it looks current and modern. And fundamentally, it communicates 2 of the key attributes, unification, unified, and excellence. So very simple, it gets 2 of your values out there, strong identity, which is critical. You'll see that because of the way we've done this, it can be dissected into, oh, this is the wrong slide, but anyway. We can dissect this logo into different uses. So it can be either just about the 125 years, Scottsdale Unified School District, or you can bring in the tagline, Unified in Excellence. Constant presence, you can just see the bullet list there of all the places that we're going to see your messaging exposed across the district. So websites, properties, school communication pieces that you already do, social content, and Gary will get into that. Interactive marketing, that could be quizzes that you do online and get feedback going. Event marketing, open houses, sporting events, you'll see an idea that we have on something you could do at halftime. Blogs and newsletters, mass marketing. And finally, geofencing, if you're not familiar with what that is, we would have the ability to feed news and messages about each school based on where you are. So if you live around Arcadia, such as myself, I would be fed any news about Arcadia on my platform, be it my mobile phone or my desktop. Do that for all 29 schools. So what does it start to look like? So imagine for the next year, every campus you drive in on, you see a banner celebrating 125 years unified in excellence. You could get it down to the school specific. You see here we use just Arcadia as an example. That's where my son graduated from. So you can see I can attach a school message to the larger brand. This could also be a banner on a sport field, fence, or whatever. You could do a double banner, so you have the unified in excellence, and then it could be a specific attribute or point of pride for a given school. This could then also then be used to embellish and, again, put the badge on every point of communication so that you go to the website, you see an ad, it all feels like family. So that's how the badge could work on your website. We also saw great opportunity to create what we call wearables or merchandising events, memorabilia, if you will. It could be as simple as a button that every teacher wears around during the school day. You could create a series of T-shirts. We had some fun doing some. I study chemistry periodically. It's worn by the science club. Let's say you're an art student. The earth without art is just eh. And just in sidebar we had as we were watching the rest of this board meeting was you could actually turn this event into a contest between schools. Who can come up with the best slogan for the school? Is it a band class? Gary's has family that went to which school? Different district. But had a fun band shirt that said halftime is game time because they were the marching band and there was a point of pride for them. So idea here being that you could communicate this against all the clubs, organizations, school by school, it could be district, whatever. And suddenly you have, like we said earlier, you're everywhere in the community. Someone's wearing a T-shirt, wearing a badge, wearing something on a backpack, who knows. Digital advertising, this is the common sizes and shapes of all the digital advertising that goes out there, so it could be very just about the unified and excellence, or this could evolve into specific school messaging. Imagine going back to the geofencing, this could be customized then to be what gets fed into a parent that lives in the Arcadia district. Or not district, but near that school. Okay, now I'm going to turn over to Gary. The idea here being that this big idea of unified and excellence and badging everything, the only way this succeeds is if we get everybody involved. The schools, teachers, faculty, potentially alumni, and then the community writ large. So with that, Gary?
Yeah, so building on that, again, we want to really look at how can we highlight this on a district level in a way that really showcases the value and the importance of this. And I mean, it's 125 years. This should be a big deal, and we really want to highlight this on many levels. From there, we want to make sure that we're setting the standard for that messaging so that we're highlighting, okay, this is how we want to talk about it, this is how it's going to carry over. And then we take it to the school level where there's executable ideas so that no school is left behind from that perspective. There's opportunities for everybody to get involved, and everybody kind of gets a voice, but it's under a great umbrella. One of the things from a PR perspective, I'm in public relations, and I always look for opportunities and how can we get these messages out. From an opportunity standpoint, a school district is the best possible place because there are so many opportunities. You have contact with so many different communities on every single day. You have students that are involved. You have people that really care about their schools and are involved and have passion for these things. So we want to create an opportunity so that all these different interests and ideas can come together and really promote the district in a powerful way. So when we look at, again, that participation idea, these are some of the ideas that we had. The number 125 really gives us a lot of ways that we can play with that, and it gives people kind of a tangible concept that they can start to think about. So one of the ideas was look at 125 notables. So the SUSD 125. These are notables, moments throughout the history, alumni, administrators, all those things that make this district great. You could carry that through with things such as Hall of Fames, time capsules, district competitions, days of service, all those really ways to really get people involved. The other idea within this SUSD 125 is you have the opportunity for schools and the students to get involved. You could select on a district level, a certain number of these, or you could have the schools nominate their favorites. You could have each school have their 125. There's a lot of ways that we could work that to create some participation. When you look at on the school level, we can look at some opportunities where we talked about the idea of history at halftime. So you've got these great moments where people are gathered as a community. Have a moment, talk about the history. You could have traveling exhibits to highlight some of the different things that are great within the district. Again, you've got class projects, Hall of Fames, time capsules, some of those things. When you talk on a social media level, really the biggest thing that we want to try to talk about is make sure that we have a coordinated calendar so that there is again, a standard and a plan on how we want to highlight these things so that we can push that through on a regular basis so that every day we have some element of this history. Again, if it's different ideas, whether it's the 125 or you want to have a day of history, all those options gives you a lot of opportunity within a calendar to really parse this out in a creative and engaging way. One of the things, since there's so many days of history involved, you could literally have this day in history or this week in history, highlight the different schools, highlight Founders Day. It's a really exciting opportunity because there's so much to work with. When we talk in terms of kind of the look, again, we've got some options of making sure that, as Bruce mentioned, we're highlighting the graphic standards across, and that we're really creating engaging posts and engaging content. Couple ideas, again, like I said, there's ways to kind of parse this out. You could have a day in history, history in the making, which you're highlighting some of the current students, that they are making history on a daily basis. And it really ties into that, here's the past, here's the present, and here's where we're going in the future with these great students. And again, the 125, there's so many alumni and so many notable people throughout the history, it would actually be kind of hard to pull that off. So we'll have to see where we can kind of have some really spirited debates on who makes those 125. And then there's always opportunities from a media outreach perspective, as we have ways to do coordinated media pitches, really get the media kind of involved and really talk about the district so that it amplifies on a larger scale beyond just the boundaries of the school district. And then when we talk about the budget, let me have Christine come up here a little bit.
This is the fun part, right? Everybody wants to know how much it's going to cost. So what we did is we developed the budget in phases. So phase one is basically your one-time upfront cost to develop the 125 years of educational excellence campaign. So this phase, we would develop the campaign's creative messaging and create all of the artwork. That would be finalizing the logo, getting your feedback on how that would look and feel, as well as developing the campaign assets, which would include the digital print ads, if we wanted any print, streaming audio ads, and video ads. It also would include a strategy development for targeted enrollment growth for each school and develop a plan, and as well, we'll have project management throughout the whole phase one. That's estimated at $60,000 for phase one. Phase two is the ongoing marketing services that Gary specifically talked about. So he would be providing public relations, social media services. It also encompasses media planning and media buying services. And then as we place that media, we monitor it, we make sure it's running as it's supposed to be, that it's performing accurately and best that it could possibly be. And if we need to make adjustments with your feedback and input, we will make adjustments on the media plan. And then you will also receive monthly advertising reports so you know how the campaign is performing and we can measure our activity. And again, project management is part of this. It's estimated at $60,000. The next line item on the budget is for the digital media. That budget is $36,000 and it's for 6 months. And that's just to maximize budget, the media buy, as well as take in consideration times where the schools and the district office may be closed for different breaks and so forth. We definitely wouldn't want to be in market with our ads generating interest, and then there's no one on your end to accommodate those inquiries. So the budget would include search marketing, which is basically advertising on Google and Bing for pay-per-click advertising. You pay only if someone clicks on your ad.
social media ads, Facebook, Instagram, streaming, audio, radio ads, which like are Spotify, Pandora, iHeart, those types of platforms. And then OTT is where we would have our video advertising, and OTT is over the top. And that's just strictly any streaming content over the internet. So basically, OTT supersedes the broadcast media and cable, as well as any satellite platforms. So providers would be like Sling, Amazon Video, Hulu and YouTube are our two good options, except Hulu and YouTube are very expensive compared to the others. And with our budget constraints, we wouldn't be able to advertise on those. But if you have additional funds, this is where we would want to place those media dollars, is here to get that out. And there again, we will be geo-targeting around the district, around specific schools, and so forth. It's very family-friendly content that we will be advertising on, so you don't have to worry about that as well. The last line item has to do with hard cost. And most districts, when we worked with other ones, they have a separate budget for all the hard cost. And so that's just TBD, but this line would be for anything that's hard cost related to the marketing services we're providing. So it may be for printing. So the banner flags that we showed you, that would, we'd need to have that hard cost to be able to print those banners. It could be postage, it could be mailing services, whatever is deemed, but you get the idea for that. The total budget is $156,000. And once we're retained, if you retain us, we would provide a more accurate pricing. Once we get project clarification, we can really drill down and give you exact pricing. These are kind of good planning numbers, if you will. Regarding the timeline, it's an aggressive one because we would like to see you in market with this campaign by the end of September. It's very aggressive, but we think we could do it, but it's also contingent on when we could get started, how fast we could move, timeliness of feedback from you and your team members, as well as approvals. So at this time, I'll turn it back over to Bruce.
Yeah, I guess hopefully it made sense. The idea here being it's a unique moment in time. It's a once in a century, and I can't remember the term, but 125 years. It's a unique moment in time, and to not leverage it and populate the community with it, the entire area the district serves, and even outlying areas, would be a missed opportunity. And your history is rich. You have a lot of great stories to tell, both at a district level and a school level. This is the beginning of how you can start to do that at very, I would argue, creative way of doing it, and also very tactical and very sharp use of your budget, like being digital. The geofencing in particular is highly targeted and specific to the audience you're serving. So you're not telling somebody that doesn't have a kid in Arcadia something about Arcadia. Why waste the energy? So with that, any questions or clarity on what we were trying to communicate?
Thank you for your presentation. Board Member Beckman.
I have two quick questions and a comment. First, the comment. Thank you for your presentation. I had the luxury of sitting in on it as I sit on the marketing and communications meeting, and we were impressed then as we are impressed now.
You were off camera. We couldn't see
yes. But something that came up that you touched on upon tonight in that committee meeting was the importance of touching on our 29 schools as individual schools under the umbrella of this campaign. While it's certainly a milestone, 125 years, and it should be celebrated, right. This is an expensive campaign should we move forward with it. And I think the committee expressed to you, as well as we hear continually from our families, our parents and whatnot, that our schools are unique and they're different and do want to be showcased individually in some way. So I appreciate you talking during our committee meetings about the different ideas to help us grow enrollment and showcase those individual schools, because it is extremely important. The questions that I have quickly are, can you touch on what you'll do for our Spanish-speaking families and how you incorporate that in this campaign? The next question is the hard costs. Are we capable, I'm not marketing, so I don't know if this is out of bounds.
No problem.
Are we capable, or do we have the, can we source some of those ourselves? For instance, if we did if the printing came back and we said we want to do some flyers or this banner, if we had the ability to do it in a less expensive manner through our print shop or somewhere else, is that in bounds? Is that something we could do?
Sure. I'll answer the multicultural, no.
Yes.
Usually-
As far as that, absolutely. We've worked with other districts that will outsource it to another district that might have a big print shop. That's fine. We want to be a partner with you, work with you. We can give you suggestions of the different vendors. But, obviously, the budget is the bottom line. And if you have a different vendor, we can work with them and make sure that they are, handling everything correctly and printing it correctly and so forth. Absolutely, we can handle that.
Thank you.
Regarding the multicultural aspect, we work with third-party multicultural experts. We have an on-staff, in fact, the gentleman I worked with in doing this body of work you see tonight is Hispanic, and we use him internally for what we call transculturalization. It's not just about translating English to Spanish, but rather how do you show the people in the shot. So, for example, this was in the medical world, you would never show a Hispanic family with just a single person in the shot. It's a very familial process in getting health care, so you'd always do the photography showing the family. So that sort of cultural sensitivity is brought into all the communications we would do on your behalf. If it would be a long-form piece, so let's say we did a piece of collateral that was long-form, we would probably turn to the third-party entity and say, hey, this is long-form, you're the expert in translation, let's do that. But for creative concepting and how it needs to be communicated to that audience, we have on-staff resources to do that. And we do both for multiple clients.
And we typically develop the English campaign first and then do the Spanish translation and make those nuances, those changes as needed. That's just how we work.
And we use Hispanic talent, so when we're doing like a radio spot, we do with MCSO, we actually use Mr. Pinzon as the voiceover, but he then speaks in Spanish. And again, they translate it for culture as well as word for word. So it speaks to the community, not just a word-by-word translation. So from talent selection to scripting to how you show something, we do all that.
Thank you.
Board Member Hartwells.
Thank you for your presentation. This is not an area of expertise of mine, so apologize if these questions are a bit rudimentary. I appreciate the question about multicultural sensitivity, and it's very appropriate. It's marketing, we're trying to engage families, and we need to meet them where they are. With respect to the kind of diversification of some of these marketing targets, the segmentation for the different schools and different learning communities, is that built into the cost that we looked at, that you proposed?
I would have to get back with you on that question to make sure I'm answering it correctly, if you wouldn't mind. I can
Thank you.
do an
I'll look
answer by
forward to it.
tomorrow.
Perfect. Also on a business term component, I presume that this is a work for hire under copyright, so all the intellectual property would be owned by the district. That's probably standard for you?
Yes.
Just to confirm, great. And then also back to the business terms. So the 156, and Board Member Beckman asked about the hard costs. Is there any way you could give us somewhat of a professionally informed range based on your previous experiences? I realize we're not going to pin you to it, but my understanding is this action item is to approve, right? Are we approving 156 plus some undefined hard costs? What is
We're approving up to $156,000 in all the digital and design work. It does not include the hard costs related to printing physical materials. Is that correct, Scott?
That is correct.
Thank you for clarifying that. I'm still going to ask you if you would, is it possible to give us just some kind of range? I realize it can be wide.
I can give you an example from working with Madison Elementary School District, and obviously they're much smaller. They're a district with 8 schools. Their marketing hard cost budget for the year was $80,000. So that's what we worked with, and how we worked with it is that we were able to provide recommendations on how to use those funds and where to use them. ultimately, it was, their decision, and we worked with procurement to secure the opportunity and vet, cost and invoices, make sure that when it goes to procurement, it is correct, they are delivering the materials correctly. But that's part of our service on this side. But Scottsdale Unified School District would receive all the invoices and pay directly the vendors.
Okay, so that would go through our procurement, unless it's internal.
Correct. It would go through our procurement, yes.
Okay, thank you, that's all I have, thank you.
Are there any other questions, or Vice President Sinowski?
Board President Greenberg, if I may, through you, ask Dr. Menzel to share with the public why we are reaching out to a firm to assist us with our advertisement. Can you give us a snapshot of what our current staff looks like to do this enormous job?
So I appreciate the question. We have in our communications and marketing department 3 individuals currently. Fully staffed, it would be 5, as we've gone through the process of interviewing but not landing on a new director, as well as we have a social media junior writer position that's not been filled. We are just really short-staffed in order to be able to cover all of the marketing needs of the district. In addition, the expertise that David Cibaluso brings to the table in terms of being able to take and create a marketing campaign, and we saw this as a wonderful opportunity, not only to leverage 125 years, but the second phase of that is really laying the foundation for how we continue to market, how we continue to support our individual buildings in terms of enrollment, telling our story. It's all about that narrative. So the things that we're going to leverage the 125, but all of that can continue once the branding from 125 goes away. All of the other things that we put in place can be maintained by the communications department. So we see this as an opportune time to really leverage that, bring in the technical expertise, recognizing that our team right now is really short-staffed.
I really appreciate that synopsis of our reality and where we want to be and what we want to be doing to share what a great district we are. We all can recognize that we have areas, that we need to improve upon, but we've been kind of suffocating in our own silence over the last couple years because of understaffed department. And so I'm thrilled. I've been excited to see the work that's been presented. I'm really looking forward to us being able to share the story of Scottsdale Unified School District, not just within our local community, but throughout our state as well. So I really appreciate this task being brought forward.
Are there any other board member questions or comments? Board Member Lindsay?
I just know we have a lot of site leaders watching. Can you speak to the process of how you would engage the site leaders at the various schools and how to start their process of helping them with marketing and telling their story?
First of all, I want to just say that we work very collaboratively, and so when you say you're shorthanded, we love to come alongside and help and determine what they can do and what we can do, so we're maximizing both, talents, if you will. One of the first things we would do if retained is that we would have a client engagement meeting where we kind of level set, and that will help us get some of the direction. In the past, with some school districts, they'll say, we've got 6 schools that are just doing great, they really don't need anything, we can handle that, but here, these other 6, they need help. So then we come up with a plan and how we're going to do it. We engage with the principal, we meet with them, we get a download on what their challenges are, what they need. Gary will help provide some of those action items of what they should do. It's very collaborative, but it all starts with a engagement meeting and a level set. Also, another thing that is very helpful for us is to have one point of contact from your team, and then I would be your point of contact from our team, and then we would filter our information. That doesn't mean you can all be on the emails, you can be in all the meetings and all that, but that one person from your team would take all of your feedback, disseminate it clearly, and share it with me so I can share it with my team so we can, in turn, give you what you're asking for. Same thing is true for my team. If they have questions or concerns or they don't agree with something, then they give me that information. I share it with your point of contact to share with you. And sometimes we just need to get together. And in the early stages of this, we would probably have bi-weekly meetings, every other week meeting, getting project status updates. Once this campaign's up and running, it's like once a month we would meet. It would meet with the superintendent, all the assistant superintendents, the marketing team, whomever you feel that needs to be in that meeting, as well as Gary and Bruce will be part of your team. I have other team members. It just depends on what the point of action that we need to make. But it all starts, and it's good communications, everything. If you have good communications, it should work very well.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Well, let me begin by saying thank you for your presentation. Very thorough. I can't say there's anything on here I don't like. I think it's certainly very thought-provoking. I like the engagement with our existing students as well as alumni. I think that is a story. Those are stories that are often overlooked and underutilized. And I believe that when people look for schools in which to send their kids, they want to see the potential, right? My kid can be the next, well, in our case, as one board member pointed out to me, vice president, but I'm not sure we'd want to advertise his spelling capabilities. But that said, I think that's something that's often in our district culturally we receive a lot of concerns about is the use of not our students, stock images, things that anyone can pull. And I really think breaking that barrier down is very important. And I also believe that, as Board Member Beckman and Board Member Hartwell's rightly pointed out, that in the long term we are looking very clearly for both the district-wide messaging as well as the individual school messaging. And we talk about geofencing those ads, but we have thousands of students within our district who could be choosing to come here and should be choosing to come here. And then we also have students outside of our district who we should be targeting, and families we can be targeting to encourage them to say we have programs and we have teachers and we have resources that you may wish to take up and come to our district. So I think that focus, I would like to see the answer to that about the expenditures and how that breaks down from the individual school level as well as the district side. You mentioned another school district you worked with. What metrics do you use to track your success your campaign success?
Well, ideally, we put a pixel code on your website so we can track. Another thing that we do is all of our ads have a snippet of code on the URL. So that code would identify that it's a Davidson Beluso ad, it's a Google ad or a Facebook ad or what have you. So that's on there. It might have the ad size, the year, something like that. So when you're looking in your Google Analytics, you should be able to pull that information and see that our efforts brought so much traffic to your site. Now, if you have a form fill, which I know you have Enroll Now buttons, but I noticed on the Enroll Now buttons, enroll, that you have to log in. And so if you had somebody who is not a student who's wanting to get more information about it, and they get there, they might, they're stuck. So we need to think about how to handle that. Another way we did it with, particularly with Madison, is they would say, okay, last year at this time we had X amount of new students enrolling, and now you're new this year and we've increased it by 15 students or whatever. So then we would say, and they agreed that, okay, if we had 10, now we have 25, we can give you the extra 10 students as a win for this KPI. It's always challenging to identify how to track. There's lots of information. It's almost scary when you look at all the information on the web that they track all of our movements. But sometimes it's hard to bring it full circle. I would say the pixel code, if you have a form fill, if there's some way that we can identify that they clicked on the ad, they hit the form filled and requested more information, that's a conversion, and then we can track that. So we would need to work with your IT person to set that up. It's doable, totally doable.
Well, I appreciate that because I think tracking the conversions and leads is important. And however we can work through our IT team with you on your expertise there, whether that is, if they're coming to sign up to visit a school, they indicate that they found out about us through an ad or social media campaign. I think that is going to be the hard data that in previous attempts and previous iterations we have not gathered, and it's been extremely difficult how to attribute the success of the expenditures and campaign.
Definitely would recommend your IT person and our IT person to kind of get together and see what we can work out.
Excellent.
Because it's definitely something I know you would want to have to be able to quantify that.
Right.
And we would too.
Do you want to speak to the custom landing page? Sometimes you do.
Yeah, sometimes we do custom landing pages, so we're doing a campaign for a specific event or what have you, and we or your team develops a landing page, and all ad traffic is to that landing page with a specific form fill. That's easier to,
Right.
track and capture that data because you're not, it's not out there for everyone. The challenge with a school district like this, you've got people who are calling, who are maybe found a brochure and stopped by, and then you have the digital ads too. So there's many methods, many entryways for that enrollment and trying to, quantify our efforts as a digital campaign.
Great. Well, I appreciate that. I think to the greatest extent possible, because I do appreciate that it's a very difficult task, even with millions and millions of dollars poured into it. But however we can work together to properly track leads and conversions would be very helpful as indicative of a return on investment here, not just enrollment. Are there any remaining questions or comments? Well, I do want to thank the marketing committee on which Board Member Beckman and Board Member Lindsay sit, and to Dr. Menzel for organizing that. I think it is a testament as well to the efficacy and usefulness of the committee system, as well as the professionalism it brings to the board. So thank you very much for your service on those committees, and thank you for moving that forward. With that said, the chair moves to approve action item 7A, authorize the expenditure for advertising and marketing services for fiscal year 2021-2022. Is there a second?
Second.
Vice President Sinowski seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board authorize the expenditure for advertising and marketing services for fiscal year 2021-2022 as presented. All those in favor say aye.
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 The motion carries 5-0. Board Member Hardwell, did you have a question or comment? I
I
apologize.
just wanted to clarify that the number was 156,000.
Correct. Up to a maximum of 156,000. I
Thank you.
apologize. I saw your hand lady. The board will now move to, thank you very much. Sorry. We try to move quick here. The board will now move to action item 7B, FFCRA extension. Dr. Menzel?
Well, first I'll just say we try to move quick, but when I estimated what time they'd be on the agenda, I told them 6:30, so.
6:30?
I was optimistic.
We started at 6.
So, FFCRA, as you know, we've had this before the board on a number of occasions, and we have the ability through available ESSER funding to extend this. The only change from what we've offered previously is that it's prorated based on FTE, so that if you work 0.8 instead of a 1.0 FTE, you get that fractional percentage. Otherwise, all of the other criteria are the same. There are 6 qualifying conditions. So those include if the area is subject to federal, state, or local quarantine, or the individual is subject to federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation, has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine, is experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and is seeking a medical diagnosis, is caring for an individual subject to an order described in number 1 or number 2, is caring for a child whose school or place of care is closed for reasons related to COVID-19, or is experiencing any other substantially similar condition specified by the Secretary of Health and Human Services, in consultation with Secretaries of Labor and Treasury. So those are the 6 criteria that would allow someone to be able to have those sick days covered and not have to take them out of their own bank. And we've been able to use this to support our employers before and recommend that we extend this benefit to our employees as we continue to navigate COVID.
Board Member Beckman.
Just quickly, I didn't quite hear you. So if we have a teacher or an employee that has a child that is quarantined and can't go to school, can they use these days to stay home with
Yes.
their child?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Hartwells.
I just want to, I don't have any objections, I just want to clarify for the community, could you tell us how much money, if any, that the district has as unreimbursed costs for these extensions that have been granted through the year?
When you say unreimbursed costs, the funding for this comes through the federal ESSER in its various iterations. To cover that, I don't know if we have any other, Shannon or Alexis, if you have any of the numbers in terms of how much of a benefit this was, but I would say that it's all covered.
So the first round that was decided amongst, that would be reimbursable when this first came out, we did actually just last week received a check from the federal government for $156,000 to reimburse us for what we had paid, what we had basically used, although we're compensating anyways, so if you're out sick, it doesn't, there's not really a cost associated with that. So we were originally reimbursed from the federal government for the first round that was done originally. From here on out, adding additional vacation or a leave plan for somebody to take off for COVID, there's not really a cost to associate, I mean, a sub-cost, I suppose, but we don't track that as closely as we were before because we know we're not getting reimbursed for that.
So if I understood it right, the answer is zero. It's not cost the district anything to do this?
Well, the money's coming from the federal ESSER funding.
Yeah, and we did receive additional fund. We received money back from the federal government for the first round that we originally did with this.
And there were no unreimbursable costs that the district had incurred?
No,
this
we were
isn't
actually
costing us anything to do this, right?
We were actually surprised that we got the $156,000, so.
Don't say that. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? I would just like to very quickly comment on Board Member Hartwell's questions, in that, again, it's important to reiterate that the federal government has provided a significant amount of funding to allow us to operate schools safely, to provide free and reduced lunches to all students. And without that funding, we would be in serious jeopardy because the state simply has not provided it. So thank you, Board Member Hartwells, for that line of questioning. The chair moves to approve action item 7B, FFCRA extension as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Board Member Beckman seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board approve action item 7B, FFCRA extension as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. The board will now move to action item 7C, approval of cooperative agreement between 1GPA and Scottsdale Unified School District. Dr. Menzel.
Thank you, President Greenberg and members of the governing board. I'll have a brief outline of this recommendation, but we also do have Shannon Crozier here. Eva Calles is available in the cloud, and Jennifer McLennan is here as well to answer questions. So over time, Scottsdale Unified and other districts across the state of Arizona have used purchasing cooperatives in order to be able to secure various services or supplies and materials. It's approved under state statute, and 1GPA is one of those cooperatives that operates within the state of Arizona. As you all know, and members of the public know, a number of years ago there were some issues that developed here in the district between prior superintendent, and it happened to be in conjunction with a vendor that was listed under 1GPA. And so when I got here, one of the things that I was told immediately was that we cannot use 1GPA for any cooperative purchases. And I accepted that. It wasn't a problem because we've been using the Mojave Cooperative. We've been using other purchasing cooperatives, and so it wasn't really much of an issue. But as we went through the year and as different needs arose, we would find out that there are some vendors that are approved on the one GPA cooperative but aren't a part of these other cooperatives. So then I started asking some additional questions in terms of, is this something that we should revisit in terms of the benefit to the district of being able to secure certain resources in the most effective and efficient manner? And does a blanket rejection of using one GPA benefit the district, or is there a way to consider adding them to the list of approved cooperatives? Earlier in the year, you approved a cooperative agreement with Sourcewell. We've never procured anything, to my knowledge, under Sourcewell, but it now is an option for us, a tool in our toolbox, if you will, should the need arise. So the question was brought forward to be reviewed by District Legal Counsel and in conjunction with our Purchasing Department and Finance Department, recognizing that as a district, there are a lot of things that we are and have put in place subsequent to what happened back in 2016 through 2018. And that includes our own level of due diligence with respect to any contract. So even when we're selecting architects that are on a list from a cooperative, we have a very robust and rigorous process, not only for interviewing them, but then for finalizing agreements. And so as we contemplated whether or not we should bring this forward, the decision was that without it, there are certain things that will take us more time and energy. And with limited staff, we still have to go through our due diligence and procurement process. And there are some things where if this was a tool in our toolkit, we would not eliminate our due diligence, but it would accelerate the process. So less time in terms of what our people have to do that would be redundant work. And there's no guarantee that if you do a separate bid for a $14,000 contract that it's going to be cheaper than if you are able to get it off of one of these purchasing cooperatives. And so the recommendation that's before you is to consider an agreement or membership with one GPA. If you look at the terms of the membership agreement, it's effectively a 30-day agreement because either party can end the relationship with 30-day notice. There are two provisions in the agreement for immediate termination, but otherwise 30 days notice is all that's required. And so we're bringing it forward for your consideration, recognizing that because of past experience, there is some concern. We believe that the district has implemented proper safeguards, and Shannon and Eva can talk about that, as can Jennifer McLennan, in terms of some of the history. But I wanted to bring that forward and open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel. Vice President Stanowski.
Shannon, can you please talk about those safeguards that are put in place?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Initially, when we would work with cooperative agreements in the past, we would do a due diligence process, but we trusted more and verified less than we should have probably. So we trusted what they were saying, and we would spot check some things to say, okay, this matches with what they're saying. Our process now is we trust and we also verify everything. So if you check the box that says, yes, I'm an architect, we don't just trust that, yes, you are an architect. Show me the documentation, the certificate that shows that you are an architect. So that's probably been the biggest change that we've made, is that we are now seeking all of the information, be it one GPA or whoever we're using. We're doing our due diligence and checking all the boxes and then saying, we're not just going to trust you, we need to see this documentation to prove it. The other part with that is that because of everything that happened with us, there were some new regulations that came out from the state saying, these are things you have to do as well. Again, we've implemented those things that the state has come out and said, okay, there's more boxes that you have to look at, there's more things that you have to check. So we've implemented that part of it, and we are following through on that process, whereas before we were kind of trusting more so that what they said is accurate and not really always checking every single box to make sure that what they said is true.
Thank you. I really appreciate that honest response and the fact that we have learned from our experiences and are getting better. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Board Member Hart-Wells.
Thank you. My questions, which I sent to you, are really not from the, I appreciate the changes that have been made internally. My questions are really from the perspective of how many changes have been made on the other end of this, right, the other party. So I'm just going to read my questions and not try to change them out of fairness since I submitted them to you in advance. What assurance does SUSD have that 1GPA's relationships with all of its parties are arm's length?
So we did have a question about that one and just needing a little bit clarification because multiple people read the question and had a little bit different interpretation. So I think what you're asking is, how do we know that the vendors that 1GPA is working with, there's not any conflict or something that would be inappropriate with the vendors that they're selecting for their procurement process? Is that?
So that's really my second question on the
Okay.
vetting process itself. What I'm asking is more from like a business corporation and maybe whether it's formal or informal. My understanding is the previous engagement, there was a non-arm's length relationship between and among certain parties. And I'm asking, how are we going to know that's not going to happen again?
So parties between us and
who they bring to the table.
Who they bring to the table. So, and this I think comes up again in one of the other questions you asked, is that 1GPA and every cooperative that's out there has to follow the procurement rules within the state of Arizona. So part of that is that there are procurement laws that whether we use a cooperative or a cooperative is doing a bid, we all have to follow those same rules. So there's that part of it. The second part is that they're also audited. And they are, 1GPA is a publicly used entity, and so there's an audit process as well to make sure that they're following the processes and procedures that we would follow even if we were doing the bid. I'm not sure if that.
Okay, well, if that's the answer. That's
Okay.
All right, and with respect to the vetting process that you referred to, what changes have been made relative to the previous engagement, specifically about Hopi, to the processes that they use in vetting and scoring? I believe there was some scoring or assessment processes that were used. For example, are there any additional steps, verifications, gates that have been added? And how are they doing this today that's different than before?
And that we don't know what that their process has changed on their side. The only thing we can speak to onto that is that, again, they have to follow the same procurement laws that we have to follow, that all other cooperative agencies have to follow, and are, again, audited on that. And to our knowledge, there's no issues that we know of. They are used by quite a few districts within the state for those
And
services.
can I add that part of the problem, as I understand it from before, was that bids were broken up to get below certain dollar thresholds in order to be able to avoid bringing something to the governing board. As a part of our processes, we try to estimate what the actual cost will be, not to avoid bringing something to the governing board, but having a true and honest review of what that will look like. So that action was not acceptable then, and it's not something that's tolerated now in Scottsdale Unified. We're going to look at what the cost of the project is and proceed accordingly. And while there's the $100,000 threshold with anything above that coming to the board automatically, you've seen us bring things to your attention before that were below the $100,000 that we thought were important as well. Some other things are routine, and so it might be a $30,000 expenditure that you have every year that is just a part of routine. But any of the things like this that we're procuring, we want to call attention to. And I would just add that we have a heightened level of sensitivity, should you approve this recommendation, with respect to any contract that we would procure using 1GPA. And so we think that it would be incumbent on us to bring that forward to your attention and for the public to see as well, so that it was very transparent why we made that decision and what the dollar amount was.
Thank you. Number 3, in the contract as written, 1GPA is not indemnifying and/or holding harmless SUSD, but we are them. Is that Why is that not reciprocal?
Mr. President, members of the governing board, Dr. Hartwells, the one GPA contract is a form contract. This is a national procurement alliance, so it is used in other states as well. I have not, as counsel from multiple districts, ever negotiated any terms with that entity in terms of its membership agreement. So I don't know why the indemnity goes the one way, but I can tell you that the membership agreement itself is something that hasn't been a negotiated item.
Is there a reason to not negotiate it or not ask?
I suspect that they won't, but we certainly can on behalf of the district try.
Can I ask a question just to build on that? Because when I was going through the agreement, the other provisions, once we make a decision or a recommendation to engage with someone that's on their list of approved providers, then the next step is on us. And I think and that's where we have to do our due diligence. And so I suspect that they would not want to indemnify a district that didn't do its due diligence in selecting a vendor and then was unhappy with the product. So they've gone through their vetting, the vendors on there have gone through a proper procurement process. Then the school districts that choose to select someone that's properly on their list of vendors has to then engage in finalizing that agreement and that transaction. So that's where the real indemnity comes into play. And so just when I looked at it, I thought that might be a reason why, because at the end of the day, we're making the decision to work with someone that's an approved contractor, but the specific terms in terms of getting the value for the district is with that vendor, not necessarily with one GPA.
But isn't that the point, right? Is that we weren't able to rely on the vetting process.
But we don't, so
we're kind
that's
of
what we don't do
stepping right
anymore.
back into the same box.
Except for Shannon just outlined the fact that we don't just trust that a vendor on their list meets our expectations. And so we do an additional level. Once we've found someone that's providing a service that we believe is a value add, so in terms of cost and efficiency to be able to move the district forward, if the best value is perceived to be one of these contractors, then we're doing that next level of vetting to ensure that they meet our expectations that way.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on. What rationale was the 4-year approval versus just a 1 probationary period year?
And I don't think that there is a 4-year approval, Dr.
Oh, I thought
Hartwells.
there was a request for 4 years.
Yeah, I don't,
We didn't see
so
that.
Did I
believe,
misunderstand that?
I believe that what you may be referring to is that when the lead agencies procure the underlying contracts that form the basis for one GPA, those have a 5-year cap on them under Arizona's procurement code. So that may be what we were talking about, but this membership agreement can be terminated with 30 days' notice.
Okay, all right, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, in terms of fees that'll be charged, what representations or assurances do we have that those will be standard fees and not non-standard, non-market?
So the only, we as a district are not charged a fee to use a 1 GPA contract. They get their money from the vendor. One of the exceptions we see with that happens to be with architect services. And with that, they will often have a fee structure that changes depending on the complexity of the project. So we've looked at numerous architect agreements of late through all of our different bond projects. So part of that is looking at that and having an idea already of what fees are standard. I think between procurement and facilities, we have a fairly good understanding of what percentage fee is normal. Part of that other due diligence is also making sure that we understand what is the line of complexity that moves us from one fee to another, and having that understanding and doing our due diligence as to, okay, based off our project, you see this as this particular percentage fee for architectural services. So that's part of our due diligence as well, when we're looking into this, is making sure that we both have an understanding of what those fees would be. Additionally, when we receive invoices, be it through anybody, before we sign, we don't pay an invoice unless it's been received or signed off as okay to pay. The person who's signing off on that should be looking at what we're being charged, no matter what we're purchasing, to make sure that what we are being charged is in agreement with what we've agreed to in that contract. And whoever is signing off on any invoice should know what the service fee is and what was agreed to in a contract or any type of agreement as to what is that fee and is that in line with what was agreed upon.
So again, we're going to rely on ourselves to catch any possible through our verification processes?
Yes, I mean, we need to rely on ourselves to know what is out there and make sure that we are being charged the right. And that would be the case with any vendor that we're doing business with, we need to make sure that we are always being charged the correct amount or fee.
Could you provide your thoughts on capping any and all contracts under 1 GPA?
Sure. Dr. Menzel and I talked about this today. We can go whichever direction the board would like us to go if this was approved. If you wanted to see, if you wanted us to cap it at 50,000, we could do that. If you wanted to see all procurement that was over 50,000 before, to approve that before we moved forward with that vendor, we could certainly do that. We're open to what makes the board and the community feel comfortable if we should move forward with this.
Okay, thank you. And then, as you know, the USFR questions that I had submitted, has management advised relevant SUSD staff of this recommendation to the board and reminded them of their duty to disclose all conflicts of interest, real and perceived, with 1 GPA?
So our purchasing director is aware that we are bringing this forward. We've talked about it in cabinet as well. Our policy is for all district employees, and we focus for all district employees, but as well as within the procurement department, that if there's a conflict of interest, you need to disclose that, regardless of if it's with a vendor or with a purchasing agreement. So all of our staff has been trained in that. Our purchasing department goes through, they actually help do the training on that. We received training on conflict of interest in April?
It was in April, I believe.
Yeah. So we've done that with all of our staff. We continue to do that and remind them of the importance. But our purchasing department in particular, who was the one that works with our employees and would be working with 1 GPA if this was approved, is very aware of the conflict of interest and making sure when we select a vendor, we have whoever's on that selection process has to sign off that there's no conflict of interest. To our knowledge, there is not one that exists with 1 GPA.
So no forms have been submitted?
No forms have been submitted for 1 GPA.
Okay. All right, so you've determined then that no conflicts of interest exists with
Not
any
with
of the
1
relevant
GPA,
staff in your determination? Okay. So I'm guessing, given this is the comment that this is a boilerplate contract that's one way, considered having 1 GPA commit to oversight provisions or reporting compliance provisions, specifically with respect to paragraph 1 in the contract, which states the specifications, terms, and conditions for products, materials, and services to be purchased under this cooperative shall be determined by 1 GPA or as requested by a lead agency, which we are not.
So as I understand how 1 GPA operates, each of the lead agencies, which are typically school districts or counties or public entities, have that responsibility for making sure that the terms of that state's procurement code are complied with. So there is certainly oversight to the extent that those agencies are also going to be audited with respect to their procurement.
Okay.
But in terms of requiring 1 GPA to provide the district with assurances with regard to the oversight, you are correct that the boilerplate agreement does not address that.
Okay, thank you. And I'm guessing that's the same response then for the next and final question, and then I will be quiet. Considered having them make a representation or warranty that no relationship of any kind with any SUSD staff exist, and will agree to assert to disclose that if it were to arise under any would-be contract with this cooperative.
I'm certain that, well, I would guess that the staff at 1GPA would be, probably put that in writing to the district, but suspect that they wouldn't put it within the body of the agreement itself. But certainly a review of who the staff are at this point in time and whether they've worked for the district in the last 3 years, that is a factual determination that could be completed.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Board Member Beckman?
Before we move to a vote, I need to explain this a little bit here. While I appreciate Dr. Menzel and Shannon, Ms. Crozier, and Ms. McLennan, trying to alleviate my concerns, and maybe the board's, about entering into another agreement with 1GPA and SUSD, my concerns are not diminished. I have read the agreement and the typical verbiage as it relates to holding 1GPA harmless, as well as the co-op's lack of obligation to be involved should a dispute arise between SUSD and a 1GPA vendor. I cannot, in good conscience, reward them and vote yes to enter into an agreement with this co-op that, in my opinion, played a role in our district's most recent procurement problems, especially at this time. So thank you, but I will be voting no.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? I have a couple questions here. So your statements today are that with all the co-op groups we work with, we do our own additional vetting to go through all the check mark boxes, if you will, that the co-ops usually do. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So the fundamental question is, if we do all of that work ourselves, in addition to any co-op that we work with, whether it's Mojave, 1GPA, what have you, what is the benefit to Scottsdale Unified School District in working with any co-ops if we do all the vetting ourselves?
That's a great question. The benefit is that when we have to do one of our own RFPs, that there is time that's put into putting in that scope of exactly what does it look like. There's that then goes out to receive that information from different vendors. There's time that then we take selection committee from our district employees. So it's their time of going through, reviewing all of those submittals, of going through possibly an interview process with those potential vendors, and then going back to submitting it to the board for approval, to approve them as that vendor. And then putting that out on the street. So there's a time lag, and it puts an additional burden. Even though we're checking information, we're not having to recreate the whole wheel, essentially, to be able to do that procurement. And so it alleviates stress off of our own staff of not having to do the entire process. We're just verifying that the process was done correct and the information is there. So it does save our staff a significant amount of time and resources.
So in effect, when you go to 1GPA or you go to Mojave or any co-op with whom we work, you identify the type of materials, whatever it is we're looking for. So educational resource materials or textbooks. They have their members, their vendors who provide that, and we can then select one of those and move forward immediately, but for the fact that we will still conduct our own vetting process to make sure that that vendor really has met all of the requirements necessary in order for Scottsdale Unified School District to work with them, including conflict of interest issues between our staff and that vendor. Is that?
That is correct. And if they have a vendor that we know we can use, that's one of those things that even if we would still take that to the board if it's over a certain dollar amount. There's that time frame, but it's essentially, we can do that faster, whereas if you put it out for the whole RFP process, you're easily looking at a month and a half to 2 month process before we can get that in place. So it's significant. It makes it so that if there's something we need to procure, it's there and we can go with it usually within, if we have to bring it to the board, a 2 week, maybe 3 week process versus a 2 plus month process if we have to do the whole RFP procurement on it. Yeah.
I just want to add one more thing, and that is that it leverages the power of collective purchasing. So if it's not just Scottsdale, but it's 100,000 kids represented in the valley, or 200,000, that bulk can result in driving down the cost. So the more we do individually, sometimes we're going to pay a premium for doing that versus if we're doing some things collectively. That's the other advantage, but not without our due diligence. And so it's both sides of the coin. We still need to make sure that we're getting the best value for the dollar. Oftentimes the cooperative gets us that, but we also confirm because sometimes it doesn't. And so it's about making sure that we are looking at the full array of options in order to meet the district's needs.
Mr. Greenberg, I also wanted to mention that when the district puts out its own RFP, you don't have control over who's going to submit vendor applications for that, whereas if you have the scheduled list on One GPA or Mojave or the state contracts, you have generally more to choose from.
Is the standard form contract agreement that lead agencies like school districts and counties have to sign with One GPA in line with what other co-ops require? Is there significant differences in the indemnity clauses or anything else with any of the other co-ops that you're aware of?
It's similar.
What in your mind, Shannon, what would, could the situation, and the way I understand it, and I apologize because this is not an area that I spent a lot of time researching, but my understanding is that the issue with One GPA was that Hunt and Caraway was a vendor member of it, and that in fact its principal, Robichaux, was not a licensed architect as he was required to be under Arizona law. Is that the
correct.
What would have stopped, other than a proper vetting process had they looked into it? Is that, in your mind, do you think that would be possible with any co-op, that somebody could slip through just given the volume of vendors we work with? Or is you're the one who would be potentially bringing forward something expenditure through them, and you oversee as a CFO the procurement process. So do you personally recommend that we move forward with approving this? Or are you, I don't want to put you on the spot like that. Do you see, what positives and what negatives do you see, and do you anticipate using One GPA within the next 12 months?
Yeah, President Greenberg, yes, we, had we said, show us your certificate that you're an architect, that obviously would have stopped that. We have new staff that we didn't have back then, that we have worked to continuously train and continue to provide more opportunities for them to learn and grow. In fact, our staff are actually now presenting at conferences as well about procurement. So I think that's one thing. And additionally, we know we have to check more. We know that we have to be, there's kind of that you get burned, you learn that lesson, and so it becomes very much on the forefront of what we do. So I think with our staff, we have really set we have to check. We can't make mistakes. Mistakes will happen, but we have to do everything we possibly can and put in the procedures that we can to make sure that mistakes don't happen, that something doesn't slip through the cracks. Is it possible? It's possible with Mojave, it's possible with SAVE, it's possible with One GPA. What we strive and the procedures that we put into place are to make sure that we can to really try to catch those things. On our major procurement, we might have one of our buyers looking at something. If it's a large dollar amount, if it's a complex purchase, we also have our director of purchasing looking at it to make sure that we've followed all of the steps so that we're safeguarding the district and ourselves. We don't want to be in that boat either. Purchasing doesn't want to be in the boat either of having to say, we made a mistake and this is what it did for the district. So the pros and cons of using it, The biggest pro is that it gives us more buying power. It opens us up to more vendors to be able to use for, purchasing things that we know are coming up. I do anticipate that we will use it in the very, very near future if approved. Case in point is McCrell is a vendor that we've been using for some things. We're at a point where we either need to use if approved, 1 GPA to move forward with more, with doing more with McCrell, or we're going to have to do our own quotes or RFP for that. So if approved, yes, I do think we'll use that very, very soon. The negatives, and it's a negative, it is, we've been burned. So I absolutely understand the, hesitancy of, we got burned, and we got burned really bad with it. As a district, like I said, we've really tried to put in safeguards to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Are you aware of other districts that use 1 GPA in Arizona?
Almost every district in Arizona uses 1 GPA.
Are you aware of districts in other states that use 1 GPA?
I'm not on that part.
1 GPA is a national co-op, though.
That is my
It
understanding.
operates in other districts.
It operates in other states.
Were there any repercussions as a result of this specifically involving 1 GPA?
Not that I'm aware of, but, as the Auditor General's report that came out recently stated, it doesn't matter how many vetting and restrictions and laws you have in place, if you have a bad actor, the bad actor can create bad outcome. So I think that's more of what we are dealing with in terms of the collective trauma.
Was 1 GPA included in the auditor's report involving Higley?
Just mentioned peripherally.
Board Member Hartwells.
I just want to clarify, the vote is not a vote on the a comment of the value of cooperatives. We all understand the economy of scale. I think the vote is working with a partner, and that is how I see it, who we have a unique fact pattern with, and the contract before us does not reflect that. So I just want to clarify that, and it is not a comment on the safeguards that the internal safeguards that the administration has put in place, has appropriately put in place. And I thank you for that. But the vote tonight isn't a comment on the internal mechanisms. It's a vote on whether we want to partner with 1 GPA again.
Thank you. Board Member Lindsay.
Has 1 GPA changed any of their procedures for approving and vetting since what happened?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Did they acknowledge any mistake along the way with what happened?
I'm not aware of.
I apologize. Emergency message. This is really quite difficult in some ways because I appreciate the fact pattern here being unique to Scottsdale Unified School District, but at the same time as they operate nationally and with other school districts even now, those districts knowing the fact pattern that we encountered, it is difficult because I don't view it as quite the same. They're not, these groups in my mind are not partners with us. They're just another vendor that provides a service, and like anything, we have to vet them the same way and vet who we work with very carefully. And I think, co-ops have come about precisely because districts across the United States and other government organizations are chronically underfunded and don't have the ability to have a large procurement staff where the economies of scale exist in a way to do this ourselves. That was one of the issues that we came up with in the internal audit, forming an internal audit department. Just the sheer cost of building that ourselves currently is a lot. And at the same time, we had a very concerted, it was a very concerted effort that we witnessed here. This wasn't a random vendor that was on this list, but they purposely got onto this list specifically to be able to facilitate their activities with our district. That was, it wasn't just a one-sided event. Not 1 GPA, I'm talking about Hunt and Caraway, the vendor.
But I thought Hunt and Caraway was on that list before
Right, but they
Right.
worked with, right, but the point is that it allowed for us to skip, I mean, we had a series in our own district of failures.
Bad actors,
Of bad actors, that it wasn't just that. And, the truth is if you were to ask me how sure I am that other vendors on other co-ops are following the, I mean, I couldn't tell you. I mean, I would say we have to vet it ourselves one way or the other. So if it's saving us money, and it's saving us time from economies of scale in terms of not having to put out the RFPs ourselves. And we can put out bids ourselves, even if we can choose and we can keep it open. I know that's a common question is, we use the co-ops to circumvent open bidding, but we do open bidding even if we have co-op groups part of us. I mean, I think this is just, I think it's just part of the climate here. I mean, I'm much more focused on our own internal controls and making sure that we vet these groups, regardless of how they come to us, because we have to vet them one way or the other. I mean, one way or the other, we have to vet them, and the question is, would you rather have someone who's at least saying, well, we've represented them up to this point, and then you take on from here, and we take, we double up that work anyways. I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I just, my level of interaction with 1GPA was minimal. I don't even know if anyone in our district, other than making the allegations we made, had any interaction with 1GPA. I don't think they emailed or contacted. I mean, I don't know what the situation was there. So I guess my final question would be and I don't know if this has to be asked in executive session instead, but are there any concerns from our council about moving forward with this?
Not from a legal perspective.
Okay. Are there any further comments or questions about this?
I will make one more comment, because I am not here to try and convince my fellow board members. I'm voting my own conscience. We're talking baseline due diligence that we didn't get from them. They were on that list as an architectural firm, and the president of their company was not even a licensed architect. So for us to stand up here and say, oh gosh, we have to do more due diligence, I'm sorry, we should have had the expectation that he would be a licensed architect when we used him, or that company. So that, plus not rewarding them with further business from SUSD, is my reason for voting no. It's too soon.
All right. Are there any motions on this matter? All right. There are no motions being made on action item 7C. The board will now move to agenda item 8, executive session. 8A, the governing board may vote to convene an executive session pursuant to ARS section 38-431-03A3 and A4 to receive legal advice from the attorneys for the public body and to provide direction to the attorneys regarding discussion and consideration of entering potential litigation adverse to Jewel Labs, Inc. The chair moves to convene an executive session pursuant to 8A. Is there a second?
Second.
Vice President Sinowski seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board convene an executive session in accordance with agenda item 8A as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0, and the board will now convene in executive session. The executive session of the Scottsdale Unified Number 48 Governing Board is adjourned at 9:28 p.m., and this special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified Number 48 Governing Board is reconvened at 9:28 p.m. The board will now move to agenda item 10, executive session action items. 10A, provide direction to the attorneys for the public body if necessary. Are there any questions or comments about this matter? The chair moves to direct counsel as discussed in executive session. Is there a second to that motion? Or is a motion proper? Is a second to that motion?
Second.
Vice President Sinowski seconds. Is moved and seconded to provide direction to our council as discussed in executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. The chair moves to adjourn this special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified Number 48 Governing Board at 9:28 p.m. Is there a second? Board Member Hartwell seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board adjourn this special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified Number 48 Governing Board at 9:29 p.m. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0, and the meeting is adjourned.